I mean, I took a good 15-year break.
That seems to be like that is like everybody's story. It's getting to the point where it's a joke on most podcasts. Is like everyone had like a 10, 15-year break.
Yeah, I mean, mine was, I literally just, I couldn't do it anymore because I was traveling for 2 sports and then playing a third in the off season.
Which sports were you playing?
I traveled nationally for hockey and lacrosse. Several hockey things and lacrosse things back there.
I see. Yeah, I played Pee Wee hockey in the 90s, which surprised us no one because the Mighty Ducks were huge, and I like that was my jam. We played hockey during the on season, and then on the off season we played street hockey, and we would wear like straight black. We wear like jet black hoodies because it wasn't like an official league or anything like that for the street hockey. We would wear jet black hoodies, black jeans, and my skates were all black with yellow wheels. And we would drive to ride to the other neighborhoods and challenge their the teams from the off season to hockey. Like it was like little like 10-year-old little like assholes like skating around demanding hockey.
So we actually do have that in the winters. My neighborhood. So I have a lake about probably 500 feet that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's 3 lakes in the area. So there's my neighborhood, and then there's the neighborhood right next to us. I think since I was we moved here when I was 5. I think since I was 6 or 7, I was playing with the adults, and we were playing pond hockey. Mm-hmm. When it got cold enough in the winter. And then 5 or 6 years ago, some guys from Detroit and Minnesota moved in that have legit ice drills, and one of them goes out every single night to surface the ice. So you basically run hot water over the top of it, and it melts the top of it, so it freezes overnight, and it keeps it nice and smooth and keeps it nice and hard. And so when I was growing up, it was just we were playing on whatever, and now it's we practically have an outdoor rink.
That's amazing.
For a good 3 or 4 weeks during the winter.
Do you still play hockey?
No. I tore my knee out senior year of high school for the second time.
I'm sorry, man.
It's whatever. I got over it quickly. Sort of. And then I played 1 year at club at CU, and then I haven't really played since, other than I'd rather skate than run or do anything else really. So I'll go out when the lake's frozen. I'll go out at night and turn lights on, floodlights on, and just go skate for a couple hours.
That's actually really rad, man. Do you when it's not winter then, when there's no freeze, do you inline skate or anything like that, or is it just you love the ice?
I mean, I love the ice. It's also just different. Rollerblading is just so much different. I think I still have a pair of inline rollerblades that'll still fit me, but I haven't looked in a long time. Occasionally I'll go do stick and puck at a local ice rink, stuff like that.
Yeah, with inline it doesn't feel the same. You don't feel like you're skates almost feel like magnets almost, when you're on the ice. You can feel you're just getting pulled, you're going yeah. With skates you're just, I don't know, it just doesn't feel the same.
There's also something.
Go ahead.
The cold air on your face when you're just skating around a rink full blast is just nothing that you can't really compare it other than downhill skiing.
Right. Snowboarding maybe, yeah.
Yeah, Snowboarding. I mean, I guess a motorcycle, depending on how cold it is. But depending on how cold it is, you don't really want to be riding it.
It's Wisconsin, so they do.
Yeah.
I see Chat Gang showing up here. So what is up, Chat Gang? I am the magical Mr. Mephisto. Welcome to RantCast 75. I am joined tonight by Colorado Greg, as I kind of know him in chat. How's it going, man?
Not too bad.
Not too bad. He is, of course, Team America ETC player for what will be going on 3 years now, 4 years?
I was a coach the first year, and then I was selected to be a player last year. Obviously, COVID happened, and then we just about 2 weeks ago announced our team for this year, and I'll be a player on that this year again as well.
Yeah, so congratulations on making the team again this year. Hopefully, I'm pumped. I have faith. I think it's going to happen. August 2021. I think it's going to happen. I believe in the team. USA. Let's go. So we're going to, of course, for episode 75 tonight, we're going to be having a I call it casual conversation about competitive AOS, and we'll see where the winds take us. You caught the cold open there. We're talking a little bit about hockey, which we do share a little bit in common. Oddly enough, when I moved up from North Carolina to Minnesota, we didn't have a hockey team, so I couldn't play hockey anymore. It was the weirdest thing. Yeah, I know. Just the one town in Minnesota that did not have a hockey team.
That's really funny because we actually so I lived in Arkansas for a year and a half, and we moved back because there were no ice rinks. The closest ice rink was an hour and a half away.
Yeah, disgusting. Well, the thing is, and I'm sorry to interrupt my own Age of Sigmar show with some hockey talk, but hockey families are like it's like a lifestyle unto itself. With the traveling and the community that like there's the way that the hockey team works with the minors. You can make a real career out of hockey in a way that football, it's kind of luck of the draw. Basketball a little bit too, but you can go your whole life playing hockey, trying to transition through. Oh, go ahead.
I don't know if I'd call it a career because most of those guys are like eating bologna on tortillas for food and living with host families.
Fair enough.
But
Fair enough.
I have a couple former teammates that have been doing that. I mean, I think they stopped a little while ago. I'm 29 now. But you know, they were doing that for a long, long time after they graduated from high school. If they did go further. Right.
So yeah, actually, I think that kind of gives me a decent like first question. You mentioned a little bit about a little bit like sort of off air. We talked a little bit how you got into Age of Sigmar early. You took a break. Do you think that like you do have? Do you consider yourself a competitive player? Like by default, do you like what's your I guess view on the sort of landscape of Age of Sigmar?
I mean, I'm a competitive person in general. If you start arguing with me, I'll argue just for the fun of it at some points, which Bill gets mad at me for sometimes. So, I mean, I can turn pretty much anything into a competition to my own detriment sometimes. But, yeah, I really like the state of where AOS was, which it was a little touch and go with the new General's Handbook. But once I actually like started playing games and getting back into it, I really enjoyed what they did with the newest missions more than anything.
Oh yeah, the fantastic GHB. I'm one of my greatest sort of sorrows this year has been how great I think this GHB is and how little time I've personally got to spend with it because I have to travel for my community. You know, I got to go to Milwaukee, I got to go to Madison, and that's just kind of out of the question. So I'm basically playing games myself. If you can see this little like 3x3 table here.
I'll be honest. I wish I could drive to more RTTs and GTs that were like an hour and a half away, a couple hours away maybe. I have Wyoming, and other than that, I mean, I have to cross the mountains to get into Utah. It's a good 8-9 hour drive to get into like Kansas and Nebraska for those areas. So I pretty much have Colorado. That's why I know a lot of people have been down on TTS. It's been a godsend for me. Because not only is my local community, you know, been on the 40K kick like everybody else has, it's just allowed me to play with a lot more people all across the country.
It gets you tools and reps like playtest. Yep. It's a fantastic tool. The official Age of Sigmar RantCast stance on TTS is we give it a thumbs up. So I think it's just like what I've been doing with Blood Bowl as a way to like reconnect and keep some competitive play in my repertoire. With humans socially, I think TTS does that decently. I don't hate on it. I haven't caught the bug. It's just something's off for me, and I'm totally like I will goldfish Magic decks for hours, which is when you shuffle 2 decks, you make a proxy deck, and you just kind of play against yourself. I will do that for hours with Magic the Gathering. I do it on MTG Online when I was still in the kind of grinder phase. Something with TTS is just not clicking. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I don't know, because there are several people that are like that. I feel like I go through waves where because it's such easy access, I'll go through and I'll play like 15 games in a week, and then I'll just spend like the next 3 weeks just not wanting to play anything, either because there's nothing I really want to test, or like I'm just kind of burned out and want to do other things. So it's been a really weird dynamic when it went from maybe I get a game in a week to like I just have so much access.
So I got a question real quick before I get to mine out of chat gang here. They ask, GDud here asks, what armies do you play? That was a pretty good good question.
It's easier to ask what armies I don't play. So I started back up with Age of Sigmar right before the first Nova 2017 was my first big event back in fantasy side of things. For most of that year, I played Sylvaneth. I played Tzeentch at LVO that year, and then at LVO that year they showed off Daughters of Cain, and I played Daughters of Cain for the next year. Other than one event, I think I played Deepkin. And then for like 3 events at the beginning of 2019, I played Flesh Eaters, and then for the rest of the year, I played Skaven. So I like try to focus on one, but if it's Elves, I probably have it. And then I've also got OBR and obviously Skaven, Seraphon. I have a super well painted Seraphon army that I literally did, and then COVID happened. And then Flesh Eater Courts. So I mean, it's as long as it's not dwarves, I'll usually play it. I actually sold Bill like 100 pink horrors, so I had Tzeentch back in the day too.
Is there an army that really resonates with you more than another? Is it the sort of, or is it like the growth and the self challenge of sort of like giving yourself new tests and things to play?
Definitely the second one. I definitely have armies I gravitate towards. Like I said, if it's elves, I probably have it. And at this point, I mean, we have enough elf factions that I could probably just sell everything else and just rotate between elves and be satisfied. Okay. Especially once hopefully Shadow Elves come out. Like I'll just, I'll have 5 armies I can rotate between and I'll be done.
Yeah.
But some of it's the challenge. Some of it's the fact that like I really get to know an army by playing an army. And once I play it, like because I've played it, I know its weaknesses, so I know how to play against it too.
Right.
So I also had Slaanesh for a little while. I sold all of them even before the nerfs happened. I just got bored with them super quickly. But like at SoCal Open, for example, I played 2 Slaanesh armies in a row, and we played a total of 3 battle rounds. Just because like I knew how to play against it.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, I mean that's why like I haven't really lost a game to Skaven because it was one of those armies I was like intimately familiar with, and I play against it a lot. So when I go to, just the nerves are out the way when I go to a competitive event, even though I was running an Agash for a bunch. It's like they kind of had Nagash's number, but it's like playing just that like wild card enough where you're like, okay, I'm going to do the risky strategy here because if I don't, I will die, and just
absolutely
familiarizing yourself with like the weakness of an army and go, okay, I lose if they get to play their game. This is the one weakness I can exploit, so I got to play for it or it's lost.
Yep, exactly that.
Yeah. And this one might be getting a little bit personal, so you can like just blink twice if you don't want to answer it. But you mentioned like hockey, you didn't really exit on your own terms. Do you think part of that competitive like sort of chip on your shoulder comes from, like in Age of Sigmar, comes from maybe like that hockey sort of ending the way it did for you? Do you think you kind of channeled your competitive nature into, or is the competitive nature just a blanket that you've always had?
The competitive nature is a blanket I've always had. I was a competitive chess player growing up as well until like I think like 3rd or 4th, about the same time I started traveling for hockey and lacrosse. I couldn't really do that. I couldn't keep up with it anymore. Mm-hmm. But I did that. Like if we played Monopoly, I'm gonna get super competitive with it. So it is just kind of ingrained in there that I'm always just trying to compete at something. It's something I can work towards as much as anything, I think, is what it is.
Right on. No, that's fair. Real quick, catching up here on chat, gang. I see people. Elves are weak and limp-wristed. Davis MMA. How's it going, Michael? I haven't seen you in chat gang in a while.
It's okay. Dwarf players are allowed to be wrong. It's fine.
Can attest that motorcycling and skiing are way different. Of course, you think motorcycle and go ahead.
Obviously, they're different. It's more the feel on your the feel of the wind on your face more than anything else is what I was getting at there.
Yeah, and Dreamer dropped 1,000 RDP to remind everyone chat gang ain't nothing to mess with. And Kicker, thank you so much for 6 months in a row, 8 years total of subbing here. So, all right, I guess, I think we kind of got enough of a background on like where you go. And now I think something that maybe chat gang doesn't know is that you have of course played 40K. So I guess give me a little bit of a timeline where you jumped in at Age of Sigmar or where you jumped in Warhammer in general. to 40K to Age of Sigmar. And I know that you're playing 40K right now with this new edition. Like just a rough timeline here so people are familiar.
Yeah, I mean, so like I was talking about, like back in like second, third grade, I played both systems. I had one army of each because I was a kid and my parents didn't really buy me things. I was doing it off of lawn mowing money.
I know that struggle.
Then, like, fast forward, I graduated from college, and my job right out of college was fairly stressful at the time. And I actually ended up starting getting shakes in my hands. So I just needed something to do. I was literally doing nothing but working or being home, and I had a job that was basically I'd either work 80 hours a week or 30 hours a week, just because it was you work on demand when something needed to be done. So it something where I needed something else to do. So I ended up getting back into it mostly because of painting. So I actually got back into the hobby just for painting, and the painting actually, like the steadiness of it and like just doing something with my hands really calmed me down. So that's why I'm a huge proponent of, like, even if you're not good at hobbying, just do it. Like, it's something to do that's good for you, and you're just going to get better at it. And it's something that, like, I've never been a creative person, but that's something that I've actually started getting fairly decent at.
Yeah.
From there, I actually, I started, like, once I started painting things and I had a full army back, I started playing in just, like, the local Games Workshop stores, like, just with random people every once in a while. And that's literally as far as it was going to go until Mike Vaginas, my teammate from 2019, who's going to be coaching for us this year, he moved to town, and he was currently a competitive 40K player. And this was the tail end of 7th edition. There were rumors of 8th edition, and the rumors of 8th edition was it was going to be 40K Age of Sigmar.
All right, I know nothing about 40K. What edition just came out this year?
9th.
All right.
So, like I said, it was 2017 or 2018. I don't remember which.
That's fair.
It was like 6 months before 8th edition came out.
Was 7th edition the one that was super maligned? Because I got out, so I was playing 40K. I joke that I don't know anything about 40K, but I was playing 40K in 4th, 5th, and it might have been into 6th edition. Right when Blood Elves or right when Blood Angels could deep strike Land Raider Crusaders, and everyone was mad. If you remember.
I don't. So I came back to the hobby about right when AdMech came out. So when those models released.
Okay, yeah, I was out by that time.
So I was the tail end of 7th edition 40K.
Okay.
And I know 6th edition caught a lot of crap because, like, flyers were being introduced and knights were being introduced.
Sixth ed is where people Sixth ed is about where I got out, and I remember people really beginning to hate the way of the game. And I didn't get out because people were hating the game. I got out because I moved. Mm. And then go ahead. Yeah.
Towards the tail end of 7th edition, it started getting maligned too, just because it got bloated. So there were a ton of detachments and things like that. And you started the 7th edition with a concrete force organization that you built a balanced army, and then they just said, okay, you can just build detachments instead, and basically got away from it. So imagine, like, you could just build an army full of battalions and didn't have to care about battle line or number of heroes or anything like that.
That's right.
So, like, there were a lot of people that with the original Corn book, there was a battalion that was like 8 heroes or something like that. And so people coming from 40K are like, well, I can just put 8 heroes in there because this battalion lets me, right? And it's like, no. Go sit down. You can have 6 heroes. That's all you get. So that was kind of the issue at the tail end of 7th. So, like I said, Mike came out thinking that 8th was going to be Age of Sigmar, but 40K.
That's interesting. And
so started playing Age of Sigmar to kind of get ready for it. And so we played a ton just because it was someone that I could play. I could, like, they were a good player, so I could compete with and kind of, just because, like, as much as I don't want to be competitive, even things I'm not trying to be competitive at, like, all of a sudden I'll just be like, yeah, I'll min-max things. Like, a buddy of mine and we just started getting into Drop Fleet. And, like, it was supposed to be nothing but fun. It's spaceships. We're just shooting at each other. And then all of a sudden, just I'm min-maxing. Like, all right, if I do this order here and go here. And it's just hard to turn off. Like, it's gotten to the point where I've told him to tell me to knock it off for certain things.
I know you. I am you. I'm not super as bad as I used to be. But the brain, at some point my brain just wants to optimize the thing because it sees a puzzle. And I'm like, ooh, a puzzle. And I'm like, I gotta solve this puzzle. Like, I just have to. And you pair that a little bit with, like, I do have a little bit of a competitive chip on my shoulder where it's like, well, I never, like, I don't, winning's not the only thing to me, which is, like, kind of my throttle mechanism. But, like, if I want to win. Like, you don't understand. Like, I need that validation of the win sometimes. And I have to, like, limit myself. I have to basically play with an inhibitor to not care. So, like, that's where, like, why I love EDH so much in Magic the Gathering, because I'm like, oh, inhibitor. Like, it's the gentleman's format, ha ha ha. Like, I can make the wacky deck, but I still try to optimize it. And then I'm like, and Blood Bowl started out that way, but then when my dice start getting really bad, then I get really angry. Like, I can't. I'm like, winning's not everything. I don't want to win the Super Bowl, but I want to level up my dudes so that they get the skills, and I can't level up my dudes and get the skills if I'm not killing people. Like,
Blood Bowl has always been a very good, like, because I can know the statistical right thing to do and, like, what's statistically most likely to be effective in Blood Bowl, and then it's so swingy because you only have so many dice that it just comes out of left field and gut punches you. So it's been something that, like, I can play without caring too much, but yeah, same. Like, when dice are really against me, I get frustrated.
Yeah.
And then I feel bad because I'm frustrated and I'm not having fun. They're probably not having fun. It's, it snowballs.
Right. And like, I don't want to be the salty opponent. Like, I try to give space for my opponent to be salty when they're, like, losing or things aren't going their way. I think that's part of the, like, the sort of accord of competitive play is, like, I don't expect you to put on the fake face and be like, oh, I'm having a blast when you're just getting diced,
Yeah.
Like, I don't expect you to do that. Like, we can have a conversation, and still try to... But, like, if you're just, like, like, locking down because things aren't going your way, I'm going to respect that, and that's what I try to... But, like, I do that because it happens to me, too. I'm just, like... And, I don't know. It's difficult. Awareness has been the thing I've been working on the most lately, is just being aware of it and then mitigating it. But, Hobby Bear says inefficiency is pain, and Frank is super pumped about Gore Chosen, which I believe is the battalion you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, it was.
So yeah, we were talking about 40K. You started getting in your AOS reps because you're convinced, and this actually brought up a.
So, like, getting back into that, so back in the day, I played Wood Elves with just enough Wood Elves to play, like, the old metal treekin and things like that. So that's what I had going into Age of Sigmar. Was I had a shit ton of Dryads, some Tree Lords, and I bought that big box that came out at that point. So until recently, I had, like, something like 150 Dryads. Way too many Dryads. It was unnecessary. So yeah, Mike got back into it, and it was one of those things where, like, it was kind of like right now. I'm playing 40K right now because that's what people are playing. I started getting into Age of Sigmar because that's what people were playing. 7th edition got kind of stagnant. 8th edition was rumored to be right around the corner, and Sigmar was what people were playing. Turns out we were about a year out, so I ended up just kind of moving towards Sigmar. So we basically spent that summer, I think it was Nova 2017. That summer, Mike had some list that he and Nick Rose, another big 40K name, cooked up that was literally just spamming as many mortal wounds as you possibly could, and it was Grand Alliance Chaos. And so I spent that summer just throwing my head against a wall with Sylvaneth, because that was Sylvaneth's counter at the time, was mortal wounds. It still kind of is. So it was literally just like lose but lose better. That whole mantra was what I did that entire summer. And I go out to Nova, and the only list I lose to was a Caleb Walters, a decently known AOS player. And it was just Skyfire spam, and it was a mission that was Nova created where I just was walking on the table and I couldn't do anything. But other than that, like, I was ready for every situation because I had literally gone up against the worst situation possible all summer long. Well, and so that's kind of what got into it.
I mean, that goes a little bit back to what we were saying before with, like, TTS and, getting in your reps and stuff. It really, really helps. And I think one of the things that, like, sort of casual, and I don't have a good term for casual player, so I'm just going to use casual as, like, as a as like a approximation here, not to disparage anyone who doesn't play at a competitive level or to suggest that people who don't like tournament play are casuals, because I find people are super passionate about Warhammer, regardless of tournament play or not. But for lack of a better term, like one thing I find with a sort of casual mindset is they're averse to the bad scenarios. And you find that if you subject yourself to it enough, you can learn to sort of overcome it. Now, obviously, if you're in a hard RPS or hard rock paper scissors matchup that we're beginning to see a little bit more and more now that shooting's back and so on and so forth, there's only so much you can do in a bad situation. But still learning to play to your outs. It is a dice game. Like, learning to lose better, I think it was how you said it. You'd be surprised, because not every player you're going to encounter in a tournament setting is of that caliber of the competition you're sort of sharpening yourself against, right? You might dodge the person who's holding your L with that army and play somebody else whose dice are against them that tournament, or they take for granted how hard they beat your army, and they don't know that you have 50 games against them, or against that army, and you know their weakness, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's also one of those things, like I said, it was mortal wounds. So it was something that was just completely going against my army completely, that I had no counter for. So it was figuring out how to either win on the mission, or like what I needed to kill to mitigate damage as much as possible. Like all the different scenarios that are possible. We would literally play 1 or 2 turns of a game and then just re-rack and play again. And re-rack and play again. And it was probably a good 3 or 4 months of this. Like I said, it was most of the summer, and then I go out to Nova and I play a Skaven player. Obviously, this is before their battle tome was out. Destroy them. What else did I play that event? Stormcast list with like the Paladors that had just come out. Like they were gone, and I was playing like a relatively, as far as I know, it was a relatively unique Sylvaneth list at the time, where I was kind of taking the center board and kind of exploding out from there and just doing as many mortal wounds as I could as well. Mm-hmm. And then being relatively durable against anything that didn't just spam mortal wounds.
Little bit of an alpha bunker, essentially, a board control style army. Yeah, right on. Real quick, Soren the Mad Lad showing up, gifting five tier 1 subs out to Chat Gang for a total of 248 gifted subs in this channel. Dreamer, Kernigget, Clothar, livestream fan, Chris, all enjoy those emotes, everyone. And Soren and Chris both popping off with 1,000 RDP each to remind everyone that Chat Gang ain't nothing to mess with. And Soren then says, "Good evening from the filthiest casual in all of AOS." He just paints allegedly. Took second at his first one dayer he went to, but he's just a painter. Don't mind him. So yeah, we talk about playing to your outs. Did you have a thought to kind of finish off on your experience with Sylvaneth here before we kind of transition the conversation?
Just that the new book made me sad. No, even the new book. I mean, it's one of those things where like you can pretty much play any army. I think right now, like you may not be top tier. Like if you run into the meta army, like you might have a tough time. But the meta's always rotating, so things always come back. Deepkin were gone for a good 8 months until Tzeentch happened, and then they came back with a vengeance.
Oh yeah, I mean they're this absolute like gatekeeper army to shooting. They look at they can, if they opt to, deploy off the table, but they don't need to. They're so freaking fast they can back corner you and get where they need to by the time the high tide comes in. Like it's brutal.
And I love the new Marathi bug. Now I get a 2-up save on my eels. Yes, please.
Sorry, Chat Gang. Boom. Just to reset our guest here. This is Greg, also known as like Colorado AOS on Twitter. He is one of the ETC team members for the USA. I think you know him. He is in Blood Bowl. Your name in the Blood Bowl Discord?
Greg.
Probably just Greg. Yeah, he's in Blood Bowl with us. So you know him, Tristan.
Tristan and I actually played last season. I played Skaven.
Are you running okay? Yeah. Yeah, and I'll have to deal with that later. I'm sorry. Ganked by Molly. Her internet is bad, but I'm hardwired, so my internet is fine. Um, I cheat. No, the so yeah, new book, kind of sad. Um, do you think it's that people haven't have kind of just shelved it as hey, this is bad, and they've stopped experimenting with it, or do you think it's maybe a little column A that yeah, it's a little undertuned, and also people have given up looking for answers in the book?
So I think it was a couple things, because it was supposed to be released 6 months before it was. And then there was a shipping issue with stuff coming from China to the UK. And then, so when it came out, I think it would have had a better taste in people's mouths. And then, but the shock that it got when it came in around the same time as Cities of Sigmar and late into Slaanesh, right around when Celeste was coming out. And you've got Kurnoth Hunters, which are the rock bed of that book that Slaanesh just walks in and laughs at. And now gets summoning points off of. I think that was really the issue at the time for them. I don't think it's dead. I just think it's super one-dimensional. Because you don't have a ton, and then you also have allegiance abilities that work against your army. The fact that bow hunters don't ignore line of sight through your own trees, fine, they can have line of sight through everybody else, but ignore through your own trees. The fact that isn't the case is a travesty. Yeah. Alariel is a huge disappointment because she's the only thing other than the Arch Revenant in the entire book that doesn't get protection from trees, and she's the one thing that needs it. So there's so many things that are just a disappointment. My biggest one is the fact that I was playing a casting heavy Sylvaneth list.
The Winterleaf or Gnarlroot, right?
Gnarlroot. Yeah. Gnarlroot. So I had 13 casts in the army I took to what was that, War Games Con down in Texas, and it was hilarious. I did 57 wounds to a Nurgle army in a single turn.
Yeah, my buddy Sam, he played he played Gnarlroot. One of his thing that he's the most upset with the book is that the spellcasting variant of Sylvaneth is just non-existent. And as someone who plays who's playing LON Nagash with 100 skeletons at the time, he kind of had my number with just the volume of spellcasting and the board control. And it's
turns out that Nagash can only dispel what, 8, whatever it was.
I get
time.
8. I get 8. One with my necromancer. One with I think at the time I was running a vampire on foot, so I can dispel 10. But only through them at a bonus, so he's still going to get through 5d3 mortals, and just a 6-up doesn't feel that strong against that much mortal wound output.
And then Roused by Magic, I don't know if it's still the case.
It used to work on my cast too.
Well, so it still does that. It used to also, it was spells that were cast. So even if you unbind it, it said in parentheses, even if it was unbound. So it still worked even if you unbound the spell.
Yeah.
So literally all you're trying to do is roll cast and then roll 5-ups.
I'm just trying to stop him from getting another tree and trying to stop him from doing stupid stuff. I'm dude, I did beat him in one of our one of our main competitive game that wasn't a teaching game. I did manage to beat him, but I beat him because I pinned him in a corner with there's just a big fat terrain piece, and I'm you can deploy on that side of the table. I used to go ahead.
The way I was doing is at the time I was a 1-drop because I just didn't care about most things. There wasn't a ton of mortal wound spam at that point when War Games Con happened that year. So I was a 1-drop that was literally just I had 3 different ways to get trees. So first I would try to cast the spell. If I don't get the spell off, okay, cool. I've got an acorn or a 4-up for the ancient. And I believe I had 2 ancients in that list, so I can't remember. It's whatever. So I tried to get it that way, and then if I couldn't get it that way, I also had an acorn. So I had 3 different ways to get trees. So either I get everything off, and I have trees literally covering the board, and you can't do anything, or I at least have an out, like we were talking about earlier. I have that final, okay, fine, I'll put down my acorn now. And then my free trees were just literally dead center, because at the time nobody played with terrain in Age of Sigmar.
Yeah, and I mean, tons of we didn't have all of our factions quite out yet, so all the faction terrain hadn't hit the table yet. just in terms of like the density of terrain we've had as Age of Sigmar has progressed, we have more terrain on the table than we've ever had before. Like we just from a TO and that sort of perspective. Oh, thanks.
I think the correct terrain is also getting on the table, because a lot of people were playing with like walls and things like that, and they've done a little bit better at giving walls rules with like barricades and obstacles and things like that.
Right.
But like the best thing for terrain on an Age of Sigmar table is literally a forest plate that doesn't have the trees on it. Like that is the thing that gives you the rules. Like it doesn't necessarily completely block line of sight. Have a couple houses that do block line of sight other places. Yep. But like just pure area terrain is easily the best thing for Age of Sigmar.
Yeah, that's a hot take. Pure area terrain is the best thing for Age of Sigmar. Boom.
Not pure, but like some line of sight blocking, but like a ton of area terrain that units can actually use and have it be functional.
Yeah, no, that's legit. That's legit. So I want to circle back to like a question or that sort of sprung to my mind as you were talking about like sort of this going from 40K to thinking Age of Sigmar was like that's going to be sort of like the play test, or that's the beta for the next edition of 40K. Do you think like Age of Sigmar is like a beta test for 40K, or 40K is a beta test for Age of Sigmar? And then I've got a follow-up question.
So originally I thought it was going to be, and then 8th edition came out, and I think they took some things, but not nearly enough from Age of Sigmar. And then I think
what?
They've force organization. So they I understand what they were doing to have it loose, and like you've obviously got armies that do want to be more elite based or whatever. But then when they didn't see that everyone was just going to bring soup and things like that, and then they were on their heels. Like once they figured out like, wait, we have no reason to have a single faction anymore, they were on their heels trying to fix everything. So now it was, no, you can't have soup, or now you can only have certain forms of soup, and now you're trying to like give doctrines and things like that make it reasonable to not soup armies together. Because when you could just bring guard for a CP generation and then have a couple knights and then like some other things in there like smash captains, you're literally taking the good things from every book and covering it with good things from other books that cover your deficits.
I mean, this is that worst case scenario of taking the old Age of Sigmar version of taking Thunder Tusks and Mixed Destruction. They weren't
exactly
just cranked up to 11.
Thunderdome AOS, when you could bring Ripperdactyls and Tree Lords together with a branch raid. So now you've got like trees that are summoning dryads into them and Ripperdactyls that have 10,000 attacks because every time you hit again. Like
Thunderdome Age of Sigmar. Thunderdome AOS.
Yep, no rules.
Go on. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. That's how I feel like we were trying to figure out rules for a game because they didn't tell us the rules. Like that's legitimately how I feel about it at that point.
Yeah.
Like people were like, okay, do we do it off wounds? Well, no, because 18 skeletons is nowhere near as good as Nagash. And then like you were trying to do it like I feel like the community is the first ones that created you can only have 0 to 4 behemoths and 0 to 6 heroes. Like I saw events doing that before General's Handbook came out with any of those rules. Because like we were basically creating the rules for our own game, which is a really cool thing. And then 40K just kind of left all that behind and like didn't learn from their mistakes in 8th edition.
Interesting.
And so I played I think 3 games of 8th edition because I hated it. Like could not stand it.
So that kind of kept you locked in Age of Sigmar then for that 8th ed period.
Absolutely.
Well, so now that like okay, did they learn the lesson? I don't want to make this into a 40K show, but did they learn the lesson in 9th ed?
They fixed almost every single one of the things that I was ranting about the entire time 8th edition was happening. Okay. Whether it's, force organizations actually mattering, CP is now costing you rather than benefiting you. So bringing a brigade, because that's what people were doing, is bringing, guard battalions to get CP. Instead, now you have, like, you're paying points to bring soup, essentially, because you're paying command points, essentially.
Okay.
So things like that, I think they fixed a lot. And then one of the best things they did is all the missions in 8th edition were boring. Literally one of the missions for 9th edition is Battle for the Pass from Age of Sigmar.
Super classic, forced engagement style battle plan.
Yep, objectives actually matter. And that was the biggest issue of 8th edition. It was leaf blower style, just see what you could kill turn 1 and then win the game.
Do you still win on tabling in 40K?
No.
There you go. It makes objectives matter all the more.
Yep.
So.
They've also done interesting things where like you have multiple types of objectives. It's a lot more battle points based, which I actually like. So that's one of the things that I've always thought Age of Sigmar needed is there needed to be a way if my opponent wins by 1 point on the primary, doesn't get any of their secondaries or tertiaries or whatever, and I get all of mine, my opponent has not won that game. I've controlled the board, I've done all the things I need to do, and then I've done most of what I needed to do on the primary, like 90% of what they've done, and then they just got that 1 extra point because either they went to first or they got the double at the right time or whatever. So, I mean, that's one of the things that I know it unfortunately didn't happen this year, but the Nova Invitational this year was basically going to be run like that, where essentially the way the points worked out, if you got all your secondaries, your opponent didn't get any of their secondaries, and then the points differential in the primary worked out the right way, you could essentially win by losing the primary by a small enough margin.
Yeah, and then of course Tristan here is talking about smaller objectives and smaller board, like, which that stuff I kind of was aware of. But yeah, but in case folks aren't, like, they shrunk the objective zones essentially for capping, and they've shrunk the battle plans, or not the battle plans, the actual table itself. But this just brings back to the sort of core question, which is, does 40K? I mean, do you think Age of Sigmar now? I guess if the shoe's on the other foot, do you think Age of Sigmar is going to like learn from 40K, shrink the table, do any of that stuff, or do you think they're going to actually try to maintain 2 separate games, learn some lessons where they can? Go on.
So I have a feeling. Unfortunately, I think they're going to shrink the table. I think that's a business decision more than a game decision. Just because, so like the Warcry tiles that are also the Kill Team tiles and what they've now released for 40K, those are actually sized because they fit in the standard shipping boxes that GW makes on their own. Mm-hmm. So those are the correct size for that, and that's why we have tiles that are like weird inches. Is because they fold out from there, and it makes it so much easier. You've already seen they've discontinued most of the hard plastic tiles in favor of those. It just makes it a lot easier. You can put that in a starter box where you can't really put a giant
rolled up mat
tile. Yeah. In a starter box, it's just not really feasible. So I have a feeling they're unfortunately going to switch. I think it was a good change for 40K. I'm kind of hesitant about it for Sigmar. So 40K, you had a big issue, like I said, where you were just trying to kill your opponent turn 1 as much as possible. And in a game where you have an average 36 to 72 inch threat range, you were getting across the table turn 1 basically. Like tanks sitting on the back line were shooting all the way across to the other back line. And so there was really no hiding unless there was line of sight blocking terrain. And then with how turns are done, where it's sequential, I know exactly.
You go, I go. Yep.
Exactly. There's no double turn to kind of break that up. So shooting meta in 8th edition was supremely overpowered, especially after they made deep striking only happen like turn 2 and things like that, because it was hard to get across the board because you were going to get shot at least 2 times before you actually got to their army. In Age of Sigmar, your average range is more like, I think it's 16 to 18, and then an average of a 5-inch movement in the game. 4 or 5 inch? 5 inch, yeah. So that makes your threat range, I can hide in my deployment zone. Mm-hmm. So I can be 4 to 5 inches back. Now, obviously, there's bridge, there's all sorts of other ways to alpha.
Yeah.
But usually that means they also have to commit.
They have to stick their neck out. Yeah.
Yeah, so with it only being a 16-inch average shooting attack, because it's usually 12 to 18, there's some 24, et cetera, they're now within my range to get back to them if they take top a turn, and I'm going bottom a turn.
Right.
The other part of that is if they sit back, well, now we're playing for a double turn. So now I can measure out and figure out how far up I'm going, where I can still mitigate as much as possible, but if I get a double turn, I can still get to them. And now I've mitigated what I've been able to take for potentially 2 turns, but I'm still able to get to their army. And that's something 40K doesn't have. And so, and then you get the other way, whereas if you shrink the Age of Sigmar board, now that shorter range means I can sit back further. It also means I can't really hide from spells as much, because that 18-inch spellcasting range is going to cover a lot bigger proportion of the board. And so it just causes other issues that I think it was a good change for 40K. It's potentially going to be a bad change for Age of Sigmar.
Well, so now I've got two questions. We talked about how Age of Sigmar sort of, even Tristan mentioned MoComp here in chat, which was of course an early sort of way of figuring out the game, right? Like and trying to balance it for play. In the Thunderdome era. Do you think that, like, okay, so Warhammer Age of Sigmar goes, okay, we're going smaller tables. Do you think that the potential is there for the tournament organization and the sort of community as a whole, since we have kind of been the grassroots game, to go, yeah, okay, you shrunk the table, nah. Do you think that that's a potential? Go ahead.
Games Workshop built that out. So they built that out into 40K because it says that's the minimum size you should play on at that point size. Mm-hmm. So you could still play on a standard 4x6 in that game and still be playing by quote-unquote the correct rules, just like you could do it with Age of Sigmar if they do it. Now, that's something that I think the community needs to decide on, and I don't know how much of a consensus we have, and the one thing you don't want, and kind of why 40K went to the smaller board as a consensus, is you don't want little pockets playing their own games.
Right.
Because in the U.S., we already have that very community-driven gaming community at this point. I mean, the joke we always have on the outside looking in is the Great Lakes is their own, like, you're your own world.
Yeah, we are. I get it.
I didn't know Brendan ran a tournament until he told me in, I think, Discord at one point with Brew City Brawl.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody on the outside knows about any of that stuff.
Well, it's weird because I mean, this is actually to your point. I was getting into Age of Sigmar, GHB 2017, about right before the LON tome came out. I committed to, like, okay, I'm gonna play Death again, because that was a point where I'm like, I played in Warhammer Fantasy Battle. I have an opportunity to stick with what I was playing as a literal child and teenager, or this is my time. I have that 10-year gap. You said you had your 15-year gap or whatever. I have my 10-year gap. I'm like, okay, I could. This is it. If I'm ever gonna play Skaven, which was like the other army I kind of wanted to play, and Dark Elves were like the other army I kind of wanted to play. Like, I'm like, if I ever, this is it. And then I'm like, so I had this big agonizing decision point while I'm playing my friend's Stormcast Eternals, while I'm playing Haywo's Skyborn Slayers actually against his Beastclaw Raiders, which were fun ass games, by the way. the original 3-inch charge drop and pop deep striking monsters with old school Star Soul Mesas. That was a lot of fun. So like, I'm learning the game and deciding what army I'm about to collect, and I'm like, okay, it's Death again, right? And I went, like, I'm like, okay, and I'm a guy who needs external motivation, so I'm like, okay, I got to get this finished for a tournament, 3-color standard, go on the internet, what are tournaments? And Nova, LVO, Adepticon, and Gen Con were, like, the only things I could obviously see. And I lived at that precise time, I lived in Milwaukee. And I'm like, no, I didn't. I was in Sheboygan at that time. I'm like, okay, those are my options. I'm like, all right, well then I aimed for Adepticon, missed it. My army wasn't anywhere near close to being done. Most of it was still Primer Black. So I missed that. I'm like, I guess the next one is, I think it was Nova. I'm like, so I buy my Magna Racks because it's the easiest way to transport an army. I do my research. I do all my due diligence. And I missed that, and I end up kind of going to Gen Con instead because it's just the travel just wasn't going to work out. So I go to Gen Con. If I hadn't ran into Kyle, who's a member of Chat Gang here, Minimum Pants, if I hadn't run into him to say, oh, dude, come to Dragonfall, I'd have never known it existed. Like,
yeah, and I think it's something that we definitely are at the detriment of, being in such a big place as opposed to places like the UK or even Europe. Like, we definitely don't have it. That's why, I mean, I get to know pretty much everyone at major tournaments. Like, there are some guys out on the West Coast, Brian Brown, and all of that group and community. We met them at LVO 2018. I played against Brian and one of his buddies. And we invited them out to our team event in Colorado Clan Carnage, that we were doing every year at the time. Obviously, COVID happened. And they came out. But, like, it was all word of mouth. There's nothing really aside from that, which is kind of a detriment. So then if you're playing, like, you know, specific rules in just a local community, that separates people out even more. See, that was the point, is you don't really want to do that. So we would have to come to a community consensus, which I think would be a pretty hard thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think 40K because it or not 40K. 40K feels more universal. Age of Sigmar feels a lot more individualist when it comes to like we're comfortable with having. Now this is my Midwest perspective. We're okay with having like 6 different tournaments and all of them having a different pack. It just on one hand you kind of talk about how we're sort of you. On one hand, it's sort of talked about how the Midwest is sort of like an island unto itself. Like it's like almost like there's these walls, like invisible walls up, and we're just kind of like this insular community. But on the other hand, like so many of us who live in the Midwest are spoiled for tournaments. You can go to a major tournament, a 2-dayer, probably about once a month, without ever having to drive more than 3 hours.
I was same with the Pacific Northwest. I know you had Alex on here about a month ago at this point. I give Jeremy crap about that constantly because between Red Tide, Rose City, etc., like they can go to a GT every 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I guess a lot, and there's I don't think that's a reality for the average Age of Sigmar player, and that is something that I think is in the Midwest we maybe take for granted here, and probably the Pacific, like you said, Northwest probably takes for granted a little bit too. But I mean, I this is just like philosophically now. I don't have an answer. I wonder if we have a better way of cross-pollinating than word of mouth. Like if I'm not talking about like universal packs or anything like that. If we just have a better way of like communicating with each other, like setting up little ambassadors to go out to each other's events, and come back with like stickers and mailers, and I don't know. I have no idea what that would look like. But I know I ended up going to NashCon because I ended up playing against the TO just incidentally at Brew City Brawl, and it's like, well, now I owe it to this awesome dude to go down and play in his tournament, and it was on one hand you get this very intimate, awesome relationships that you build sort of naturally, but on the other hand it's like we have all these great tournaments, and how do we drive that word beyond word of mouth?
Yeah, I mean it's a hard thing too, just because we're quite often relegated to smaller space at big like cons than 40K is. So, it's a catch-22 between Brew City Brawl, for example. Like I played against Brendan at Adepticon 2 years ago. I guess 3 years ago now. I don't whatever. And I think it's a
COVID time warp. Who knows? Go on.
Yeah, I think it's a big catch-22 between, like, if I go to a GT, do I want to see all my friends that I already know? Or do I want to, like, grow it to people who I've never met before? Like, it's hard to make that concession either way. Like, do I want a whole bunch of people I don't know coming to my event? Or do I want to see all my buddies that I maybe only see 2-3 times a year?
Yeah, and I know this isn't a universal thing, but I think most gamers probably tend towards introverts too, right? So there's a certain comfort in sticking around the faces and meeting new people on like a drip feed sort of case-by-case basis, like the couple people that come into your region for tournaments, as opposed to going into someone else's region where you might know a couple people, but everyone's a stranger, right? That can feel a little intimidating.
I think that's one of the benefits I've had being in Colorado, where we only, like, I'm working on getting it, like, I'm trying to get it where we basically have at least 4 GTs a year. One being the team tournament, one being, back in the old fantasy days, there was a King of the Mountain Invitational that was run every year, and we did it 1 year here, and then it kind of fell off, so I want to get that back. And then basically, like, 2 other formats. I don't know what they're going to be yet. One's probably just a standard, like, GT, and then another one that's like a different format, but like 4 GT level events a year, like 1 each quarter, I think is just something that would be really good for the area. But not having that, I think like me going to Nova and Adepticon and LVO and SoCal, and those being my events for the year, I think has made it where like I've met a decent portion of the community while still staying relatively under the radar. I just know people rather than being known as much as anything. The first year for ETC, the first year we went, the first year they had Age of Sigmar, in fact, I met Bill at Nova. I had met him once before. I got to know Bill at Nova that year, the year before. So, like, we didn't really know each other until that happened. He knew Mike because Mike by that point had moved back out to the East Coast. and knew like Nick Rose and all them that Bill was also friends with. So that's how I got to know Bill, was through that. I met Alan that year at Nova as well. He was playing one of my friends in 40K. And then I really met him once he was on the team when he came out for SoCal. So like most of the people that I've met in the community and some of the best people I know in the community have been at major events because I've had to branch out and reach outside of my own community. So I guess that's another kind of catch-22 because like there's good things and bad things about both sides.
Well, you want an organic, like you want that organic grassroots local scene. But there's so much lost if you don't go out of your comfort zone at least once a year to like a big someone else's regional thing. I mean, that's why Adepticon's pretty nice because it's like the melting pot for the most part. It's in my backyard though, so you know my tournament privilege here coming through. I mean, go Nova or LVO are I think the other two that fit in that same category where like people kind of travel to it to experience that. SoCal's
definitely getting that way too. I mean, obviously it's on the coast, so it's a little harder. But I mean, they had 48 last year, and there were some people that came from the East Coast specifically for it. But again, it's one of those things where like I didn't know about SoCal Open until I started like getting closer to the TO for LVO, and we started talking. He's like, "Well, I test all my packets for LVO at SoCal. Like, why don't you come out for that?" I'm like, "Where is it?" It's like San Diego. Cool, nice and easy. Like it's a $30 Uber from the thing. You can stay at a hotel right across the street from it, and it's at a big like horse track, and it's just like a big convention center in there. And all they do is 40K and Age of Sigmar, and it's fantastic.
Soren here says Soren shared the Texas Masters thing here, and he says a nationwide format would be awesome. We were about to have our Midwest Masters. It would be this December right now. It was sort of a pseudo invitational type event. And that doesn't get to happen now because reasons. But yeah, I don't know. Like I'm not necessarily for a nationwide format, but a place to. I know that Games Workshop has their little events calendar, but that has so many blind spots in it. I feel compared to like if there was just like some tournament site, more U.S. organic, where it's just like here you go. Hey, this is every tournament we have. You know, people just say, hey, this is how many I had last year, this is how many I expect this year, this is my tournament, this is where it is, yada, yada, yada. And we just a nice, clean, this is where they all are.
There's also certain controls that have been put in place for things to be like Games Workshop stamp of approval for events, and some people don't want to do that either.
Yeah.
Like, it's a really interesting community where, like, we want to come together, but we also, like, stay out of my yard type of deal, where, like, don't interfere too much.
It's such a weird conundrum to me because I feel like in 40K, I feel like they are a little bit more universal, stock standard when it comes to the community and how they play their game. And Age of Sigmar, I really do think it has to do with what I was calling the Wild West, and now I'm stealing your term for it. The Thunderdome era of Age of Sigmar. I think it really has to do with that more than anything. Is you had to have the tournaments really did dictate. The TOs and the gaming clubs and the stores, the LGSs, dictated the way that game looked, more so than Games Workshop ever did. And relinquishing that control, even 5 years later now, you know, we're in the 5th year of Age of Sigmar, isn't easy. And I
for sure.
honestly think it's for the I think it's a little bit for the better that Age of Sigmar has that individuality to it. Personally, I would like if you hand me a tournament pack, I read it. I'll play your tournament, you know. I think we can have a bit more of a standardization in the reporting of like our tournament results. One of these things I've heard is like this sort of like looking at like a 4-win, looking at it in terms of like getting to 4 wins and how reliably your army gets to 4 wins, and not even counting sort of like day 5 because there's so many variables, or round tournament 5 or the round 5 in your tournament, and using that to kind of gauge how strong an army is. I think. Things like that. Go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, I have said for a while that I think you can get to 4-1 with any army, and getting 5-0 with any army, you need some sort of luck. So, I mean, I think that's a fairly safe thing to do that I think would probably be beneficial.
Yeah.
Another thing, as much as I know ITC for some people is a touchy subject, And as much as it's a standard for 40K, it really isn't, right? Because like Nova 40K ran their own missions for years and years. Literally, this year was going to be the first year that they were going to use the 9th edition missions. They've created their own for years and years and years. They've created their own standards for that, but they still just reported to ITC. And that was one of those things that ITC was is such a loose structure that they don't really care how you run your event. It's just a formal reporting system as much as anything.
I think that the pushback I've heard against adopting ITC into Age of Sigmar is a fear of the that guy. And this is a prominent fear that we have as a community. Folks are afraid of the that guy, and that's why they don't want to go out to a tournament to begin with. They think it's just all that guys. I'm here as one of the people that will constantly be an ambassador for tournaments. There aren't that many that guys at Age of Sigmar tournaments. I have had one bad game in 3 years of tournament play. One game where and it wasn't even a that guy, it was just a bad game where they were on their phone too much. Like
I've had 3, and one of them was a person that's kind of known for it from what I've heard, but I didn't hear it until afterwards.
Yeah.
And then one of them was actually at Adepticon, funnily enough, and it was just someone that was slow playing. I don't know their name. I don't know who they are. I literally could not pick them out of a lineup. That's how I was very drunk against my game with Brendan, and it was right afterwards. So I was coming down, and I did not want to be there at all. Like, it was just a miserable experience. But it doesn't happen very often. Like, it's rare for me at least, to meet someone that I wouldn't want to play again.
Well, because the that guys tend to get weeded out by the tournament sort of. Like the Relians, the Brendans, I'd imagine are a that guy weeder. Like they just don't. They're big fishes in small ponds, and then they go to a tournament and they find out Darby Shark's here. Like they just don't. They either have to relinquish their that guy status, or they have to get their shit pushed in until they're humbled. Like I mean, I'm not saying they don't exist. I've heard everyone's got a story or 2 or 3. But it's not something to live your life in fear of. My point with the ITC thing is if you flag your event as an ITC thing, and again, this is the pushback I've heard. If you flag your event as an ITC event, you get people that come to it just for essentially the ITC points, not so much that sort of, again, that grassroots. We just want the local.
I get that. I get that nervousness. The other thing, it's kind of funny because the first pushback that I heard was that ITC told you how to play your event, when literally there is not even a Age of Sigmar ITC packet currently.
That's right.
The most recent packet is from 2017 if you go to their website, which I think is just funny because it's literally just playing the game. But you can also just run your tournament however you want. Yeah. But I understand the whole not wanting people who are just out for ITC points and that not being the best sport of the event. But like you said, I haven't really seen those people in general, let alone those that are focusing on ITC.
Yeah, like I said, that's the pushback I've heard. I like to, throw out the information I happen to know. I don't know. I got to be honest, an idea of a universalized... I've switched my opinion on this. I used to be the Magic the Gathering grinder, right? We've got formats, we got standard, we've got the Eternals, we got extended, yada, yada, yada. I used to be like that. And when I came to Age of Sigmar, I'm like, yeah, we should totally have a universal pack. Why don't we have a universal pack? But then I spent years playing everyone's different event, and I'm like, imagine if all these events just used the same pack.
I think it'd be boring. I'd get so bored. And that's the thing. Whether it doesn't even have to change the gameplay that much. Just unique secondaries or unique tertiaries or mechanics or board mechanics or whatever it is. I think Scott on the West Coast does a really good job with that. Just making every single event feel fairly unique. He used to do Broadside Bash as well. And Broadside Bash, he always had it pirate themed. So there was always random stuff going on that to just tweak the game a little bit. And then LVO was his all right, we're sticking to the book. We're playing this game and that's it. And all of his other smaller events were either testing things or just adding wrinkles to things, which I think is fun. As much as I wouldn't want to play it every time, I think the Super Series is another unique wrinkle that's going to be a lot of fun for local events to start having for team events.
Yeah.
Team events, I think, are my favorite events that there are in Age of Sigmar, so more of those is always better. I was super excited for Adepticon teams this year.
Me too.
And then, unfortunately, that didn't happen.
Oh, I was going to be playing with Tom Lyons and Benjamin Sava. We had so much plans with Haywo. Oh, it was just going to be a field of killers out to, like, drink beer and have fun, but also kill. Like, it was, man. I was so pumped for that. But
I mean, Adepticon teams for 40K is the event that, like, no matter how not narrative you are, everyone gets super narrative with it. Alan Pajama Pants literally built a golden throne for their army this year, and all of their armies were going to be on, like, TV dinner tray things that were coming out of it, and they were holograms of, like, him directing forces on the army, and then there was going to be a, like, kegerator built into the seat itself.
Nice.
So, like, that army, that thing was just going to be fantastic, and, I mean, he's not exactly known for being much of a narrative player, but that was the one event that everyone just went all out for, and so, you know, it's fun to just have those unique events like that.
Yes, I 100% agree. I still want to show up, and I think it's got to be Nova. My dream is to go to Nova in full-on cosplay. I want to dress like a necromancer or bone shaper or something, and by this time I hope my son's old enough and he plays, and I'm going to have him dressed up like a skeleton, and I'm going to sit back and point and gesture and have him play my army like a necromancer ordering around his skeleton minion. It's a dream I have.
You and Chuck can do it together.
Yeah. So, and then Hobby Bear here. I was gonna narrative all of you to death. None of you stood a chance. Holy Havoc's a blast too. Yeah, I don't think even if there was a universal pack, there in the GHB there was essentially.
I mean, the GHB is a universal pack. That's literally what it is, and then people can mutate it from there. They even give you ways to mutate it. You have whatever it is,
Anvil of Apotheosis, yeah.
Yeah, Anvil of Apotheosis. You've got different campaign books that you can throw wrinkles in that literally say, "Hey, this is for more narrative play." That doesn't stop you from using it in an event if you want to.
Right.
Like there are all sorts of things like that. Just put it in your pack. Like, that's the biggest thing for me is going to an event and getting shocked with something happening. That's kind of a feels bad mechanic. Like, oh, okay, I literally can't function with this army because I didn't know this was going to happen. But as long as you put it in your pack, like, people can read. It's their fault if they don't read at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I've never read a pack to this day, and I do mostly fine. But that's the joke.
Always read the back.
Read it the day before, everybody, in your hotel room. Don't read it. Certainly don't read it the day of when, like, you need to know what your army should be at the tournament, or if they have limiters on, like, your army, and then you show up with an illegal list, and then you're surprised that your list is illegal. Nah, read it to make sure that has the most likelihood of happening. You read the pack the night before, and then when you show up to hand in your illegal list to the TO, you go, I didn't read it until last night, and they will always let you break the rules. They'll make the exception. That's how it goes.
All I'm saying is there's an easy way for the community to not have to deal with people that do that, and it's called Best Coast Pairings. And lists can be formatted as green before the event even starts, and the TO doesn't really have to do anything. So, yeah, great way to do that. Fully recommend it.
I like my way better. So I think I already asked the question, should Age of Sigmar and 40K be the same game? And you have a unique perspective here. Like, 40K doesn't use the priority roll, right? And Age of Sigmar does use the priority roll. So you're here to answer this with your perfect perspective, once and for all, about how Age of Sigmar shouldn't have the priority roll to be more like 40K.
I mean, we've kind of talked about it earlier, but especially as the game gets more and more rock, paper, scissors, it's a defense mechanism as much as anything else, because even the worst army in the game, if it gets an opportune double turn, can beat the most meta army in the game. I don't care who you are. So that's kind of one of those unique things. Now, again, like we talked about earlier, with so much shooting in 40K, I think it could be bad to have a double turn in 40K. But Age of Sigmar, I think it's a defense mechanism for things getting too varied.
So you're saying that the in in Age of Sigmar, the priority roll is like a good thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Right on. I mean, it's a mechanism for the double turn. Right? It's once you get a certain level of play experience in, you know how to play to and for the double turn. It always gives you an out, and it does mitigate shooting a little bit. Like I think shooting's gone a little bit too out of bounds, just in its efficiency and stuff, and the fact that we're able to teleport a lot of our big shooting threats teleport, and that's become a small problem. That's going to get mitigated a little bit as the water level rises in Age of Sigmar of the average skill player, because people just know their deployments a little bit better and not get caught out as easy. But for the most part, if you get to fight on both players' turns with melee, you don't get to shoot on both, and that is a big throttling mechanism that sort of amplifies shooting, or sort of really puts a throttle mechanism on shooting, because if you do get that double, it can be 4 full combat phases until you get to shoot again. 3?
Yep. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, 3. That's a pretty big. So if you stick your neck out, like with this goes back to the table size thing. With that table size being bigger, and you have to advance to stick your neck out to shoot, that's 3 combat phases of pain.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And so, I mean, it's also something to look at rules, list writing wise, because if you do, like, I think it's from our fantasy days, but we have such a mindset of these big blocks and phalanxes of units that are just moving up the board, and splitting to MSU is a very 40k thing, because there was literally a mechanic to do it with Space Marine squads. But like, if you have multiple smaller threats around the board, it creates an issue with target priorities. It creates an issue with target allocation, because people can't, like, you have to
math every single time.
Yeah, and then it's a dice game. So what if you don't math? Especially with things like feel no pains on the board, or minuses to hit, or things like that. Like, the math just varies quite a bit, to the point where only Daughters of Cain and Plague Monks can really roll statistically average every single time.
Right. Question for Greg. If there is an area you would want to change in AOS, what would it be? Strong question.
So I don't particularly. So as much as I was talking about, like, it being okay that we're getting a little more rock paper scissors because we have defense mechanisms, I think it's a bad thing. I think that how do I put this? I mean, going up against a hard counter is always a feels bad mechanic, right? And what I was saying to people coming out of this GHB before I really got into it, was that you were basically going to have rock, paper, scissors at smaller events. And it was going to be completely luck of the draw. You had to be able to make your way through it, because there was going to be that one guy that was going to be playing your hard counter, and you had to hope you weren't playing it. Whereas at GTs, you were able to balance it out a little bit more, just because the field was going to be that much bigger.
Right. But a one-dayer or a local scene, the hard RPS is very toxic to those.
So the way
I wouldn't say toxic, but feels bad.
The way I kind of see the game right now from a high-level perspective is you do have a big circle of rock, paper, scissors going around an outside ring that are literally just hard countering each other. And then in the juicy middle are all the toolbox armies, whether it's, I mean, Seraphon's a little strong right now, but they are a toolbox army. You've got Skaven. You've got several others that are rounded out enough books.
Age of Sigmar, I think.
Yeah, that are rounded out enough books that you can kind of secure your outs a little bit. And that's usually what I like to play in like a singles event, is something like my Skaven, where I've got something that can deal with what would normally be a hard counter for me. So then it turns that hard counter into more of a soft counter. And I think that's where the game is better, because then it's actually someone playing against someone else, rather than just like, hey, my mechanic goes through your mechanic. Right. Sorry, you lose.
Yep.
So I think the game's in a good place defending against rock, paper, scissors while also promoting it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like a little bit of maybe it's kind of like because we do have this thing that's sort of stopping it completely, it's disguising how big of a problem it could be. You know? Like, yeah, it's got this like people aren't realizing just how bad it could be, and so as we sort of shift towards a harder RPS as opposed to a softer RPS, difference between soft counters and hard counters, right?
I mean, we also have no events right now, so that's another big thing. Like, we've had a few UK and Europe events and a few New Zealand, Australia events, but like the US hasn't had any events, so we don't even really know the meta right now. This is all off of theory and TTS events, which, as much as I love TTS events, they're like, I'm playing janky stuff at TTS events. I'm not playing things that I would take to a normal event. I'm playing things that I want to test out to see what they can do. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I won one TTS event with Sylvaneth that we were talking about earlier, and it was literally, I went into it like, I'm probably not going to do anything with this, but I think this is the best thing for Sylvaneth that I can get right now. I'm going to test it, paint that, if it works, and then sell off everything else. And that's what I did. Because obviously it worked relatively well.
Like, people weren't ready for your technology.
I mean, there were some... So it's one of those things where, like I said, you can win with every army because it is so objective-driven right now. And sure, there were risks that I had to take in certain events. In the finals, I was playing a localist, Legion of Chaos Ascendant. And I don't think it was the best localist I saw, but to kind of manipulate the player into making some mistakes and then taking risks to take advantage of those mistakes, and it ended up working out.
Right.
So, I mean, it's not going to... No army can walk over every other army, but you usually have some sort of out.
Heavy D6 just wants to know the list. What did you use for Sylvaneth?
I mean, this was a while ago. Basically, it was...
You're gonna run the show for a minute here. I don't know.
Okay.
I gotta use the restroom real quick. So, if you're playing the RantCast drinking game, this is where y'all finish your beers.
So the list I did actually change afterwards a little bit. But essentially, it was a block of 6 Scythe Hunters, 2 blocks of 3 Sword Hunters, a block of 10 Dryads, 2 blocks of 5 Revenants, an Ancient, Durthu, a Branch Wraith. And then it was going to turn into a second Branch Wraith. In that event, I had an Arch Revenant. And I was doing it in Harvest Boon so Durthu could run away, is essentially what I was doing. So, you were having to pick your engagements. That game against Loka, we were actually playing Battle for the Pass. And so I essentially had to, like, move out a little bit to get him to engage with his Blood Crushers into not Kurnoth Hunters. And then I was able to come around with Kurnoth Hunters and basically pin and win. And it was a matter of pinning things in place and then taking out all his heroes. So obviously he couldn't just summon infinite pink horrors for the end of the game. And it was like, I barely won that game. I won that game by 1 model because he ended up bottle shocking out one of his units of pink horrors that were down to Brimstone on bottom of 5. So he ended up not taking a point. So, but by no means was it an easy win, but it was a win I probably shouldn't have had. I'm gonna open up Twitch real quick so I can actually see questions.
All right.
Oh, you're back. You're back before I even got Twitch loaded up.
There you go. That's the only question hanging out there. They're talking about the 9,000 IQ play. Greg, what are the battle plans that you're ideal for a tournament pack, and in what order? Ooh, what order might be rough? Soren bringing the hard questions, the hard hitting ones.
So I used to have a set one. Hold on. I used to have a set 5-round GT that I thought was the most competitive, and basically it took things that prevented some of these more gimmicky armies. So, like, the second you throw Total Commitment in a pack, right, now you stop some of these, like, 1-drop Shootcasts and 1-drop Skyborn Slayers, things like that, just because they don't function in that game. Now you're having to walk across the table at 4 or 5 inches a turn.
Mm-hmm.
Latter Part of Valor, I think, is my favorite mission, and I know a lot of people hate it, and it's purely because it is all based on math and statistical averages, and knowing when to burn your point and when to go after your opponent's point. Because literally, you could both sit there for a draw if you wanted to in that game. It's figuring out how to steal an objective and not lose yours, or not lose yours at the right point and burn it early. Mm-hmm. So I think that's my favorite mission. I really love Force the Hand. I think is another really good one, just because it's counterintuitive to a lot of the other missions we have.
This is one of the new ones that is just stellar.
I love both of the new ones. Knife's Edge I also really love. So Knife's Edge... there's another one. KO doesn't really like Knife's Edge, right? Because by the time they table their opponent, like, sure, you can table your opponent in 3 turns, but if your opponent has all 6 objectives for those 3 turns before that, all right, now you can't win. So the mission is now a soft counter to KO at that point as much as anything else. So now KO has to think about, all right, am I going to bring that one drop where I just drop a vortex and blah, blah, blah? Or, like, is my goal only tabling, or am I actually going to try to bring a balanced list with a book that isn't really intuitive to bring a balanced list?
I like G-Dead's question here. He says, what draws you to elves?
Jankiness and breaking rules is what draws me to elves, as much as anything else. It's kind of a running joke with my friends that, like, every elf faction just ignores rules in some sort.
Well, they were the first to get always strike first, effectively.
Yeah, so Lumineth has the double activation thing, right? And then they've just got, like, more, I would say, crowd control than any other book in the game right now.
Well, they're a utility board control army, masquerading as like a DPS army, but. Yeah,
which I think they're really not that great of a book. I think they're more of a gatekeeper army, and I don't think it was a very well-written book because I think the way it sits right now, you either make half your opponents you make feel bad, and half your opponents make you feel bad. So it is
army.
It is the epitome of a gatekeeper army because all those people that don't know how to play against it or it's good against just, like, hate your guts after you play them. And then the other half, you're playing KO, and they're just sitting outside of your threat range the entire time. And if you don't win a priority roll the entire game, they literally just pick off a unit a turn, and you can't do anything.
Do you think some of the feels bad can be mitigated by player sort of a heightened player awareness? I talk about raising the power, the water level of our player base because, I think if we were to rank the average skill level of the Age of Sigmar player. I don't want to say skill level, maybe engagement with the rules. It's not quite skill, because, like, they're super competent players in Age of Sigmar, but some of them just, like, don't care to play that style of game, so they just, like, check out. The water level, for me, doesn't feel as high as, like, Magic the Gathering's, like, sort of player water level. And that's nothing against Age of Sigmar players. I love this game way more than I ever liked Magic the Gathering, so... and it's not just because I noob stomp. It's because genuinely the community here is just the best at any game I've ever been a part of. I've played tabletop role-playing games pretty much as long as I've been alive. My first experience with a tabletop RPG was 9th grade, right? Or not 9th grade, as a 9-year-old in 4th grade. Like, long time. And it still took me... basically until these last 3 years to really find, like, niches in the tabletop RPG community, and they're just, like, tiny niches with a couple friends. Age of Sigmar, I showed up to one tournament, made lifelong friends, like, just... So nothing against that, but do you think if some of that, like, feels bad could be mitigated by raising the water level of the average player?
Yes and no, because there are certain things. So, biggest example is the first time I played against Skaven with Lumineth. And my Lumineth list at the time was literally a bravery bomb control list with archers to pick off things. Not 80 archers like they're playing in the UK, because one, I think that has too many hard counters, and two, I think that's in some ways even more of a feels bad because you just kill all the characters and then they're done. Mm-hmm. But like it was a lot more control, a lot more playing the game, so I didn't have a ton of hard counters. But at that point, when you're making Skaven -3 bravery and then rolling 2d6 trying to beat their bravery to make them not do anything, and their bravery 4 or 5, like you're literally just making your opponent not function. Because anything that's bravery 4 they literally cannot do anything.
Mm-hmm.
So now their army just does not function. And there's too many ways in that book to make it so it happens, whether it's Balewind or Spell Portal or all sorts of different things that can just make it so that's gonna happen. And that's why I kind of think that's, like I said, it's kind of the ultimate gatekeeper list, because it's just gonna keep some people out of middle tables, which is, I don't think that's great for the game. But it's a fun army to play sometimes.
Is that? I mean, I think that's the beauty of a tournament. If you have 5 games, you can't play against Lumineth Realm Lords all 5 games, statistically
for sure
speaking.
Not. Yeah.
You know, if you just play LRL once, you can still have a net positive day. But you said something really interesting in there that I think is worth noting, is keeping people out of middle tables. And maybe that's the watermark that I've been searching for terminology for, is when you're actually, like, gatekeeping middle tables.
Yeah, so, hot take, I think OBR was the same thing.
Petrifex Elite was.
Yeah, Petrifex Elite was a middle table denier. So, like we were kind of talking about earlier with new people kind of coming into the tournament scene.
I just need to note that that's not a hot take anymore. I raised over $7,000 for Mental Health America to have them change my mind on Petrifex Elite. But continue.
So the way I kind of looked at OBR going into LVO, because I think LVO was the most balanced the game has ever been. We don't really have enough data right now to tell me if current game is even better or not, just because we kind of had a hard stop on everything. But LVO, in the top 8 for day 3, you had Stormcast, Slanesh Celeste after the nerfs, Fire Slayers, Skaven, 1 OBR player, 2 Daughters of Cain players, and what was the last one? Oh, an old Tzeentch book. The old Tzeentch book, because we were still playing with the old rules in LVO. So you had 7 different armies, and then the only one that was doubled up was the 3rd oldest army in the game, in Daughters of Cain. Which Daughters of Cain are just kind of Daughters of Cain. They are what they are. It's kind of just a force in the universe.
They're the fulcrum. They are gravity. You know, like they're like if you have a teeter-totter, that is the entire metagame. Daughters of Cain is the fulcrum, like at the center. Yeah.
Yeah, and then eels are on either end, where they're either like broken or they're like not functional in the meta.
I like that about them, though. I know. I
love it.
Some people hate that. I love that about them. Like I love
eels. I love the Numerathi book. It is just the Numerathi book in general. Just gave me so many more toys to play with elf-wise.
Eels are for me. They're I don't. This is one person in chat gang might get this reference, but for me, eels are Icarid. They're dredge. They're the one deck that if people stop bringing their sideboard hate main deck, you take it to a tournament and you just boom, got them, and you just like skate all the way to the top 8, right? But the minute people are like, fuck, people are bringing Icarid again, they're like, God, gotta put in my sideboard hate into my main deck, and Icarid will never top 8 now. Like that's IDK. IDK is just like what you look at. You test the wind wherever the meta is, and I love that about it, though. I really do.
I love eels. I think my eel army is actually my most well-painted army that I've done for Age of Sigmar so far. My Seraphon army has LEDs, and I still prefer my eel army. Like, I just love that army. But yeah, so if you looked at LVO for that, and if you look at go look at the standings in BCP right now. Where OBR was, because there was only one in the top 8. Where OBR was that 11 to 20 range. It was that like top of the middle tables, and they just dominated it because a lot of those people that were bringing that aren't bad players but were bringing fun armies, or they're new players getting into the game, they didn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah,
and they didn't have a way to deal with it, so it created a wall. It was a gate. And that's, I feel like a lot of times that's the people who get stuck down on bottom tables, is they end up playing something like that just like, cool, maybe they play against Bill Souza round 1 and get stuck in the low tables, and then they never get out of it because they're playing all those people that are 2-1 or 3-2 and et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a cool take, and I like the idea of that sort of, where is that problem is actually on the middle tables. I think it's almost like, how do you gauge the success of a population, to use some social science theory, right? Is like by the people who are doing the worst. If you want to know the health of a society, look at its prisons, is an old adage. I can't remember who was originally attributed the quote. Like, not that like the mid tables are the prisons by any means, but if you want to do a real litmus test of the health of the game, you look at the middle tables of Age of Sigmar, not the top tables and not the bottom tables. Like, you really got to see what's going on in that sort of that middle, right?
Yeah, I mean the middle is where you see more armies than anywhere else, right? Like more different armies, because you have Gloomspite armies that are going 3 and 2, especially before they took away their endless spell fun.
Oh my gosh, they need a sub-faction that ignores that rule.
Maybe they give that to the regular Git sub-faction.
Wait, just give it. They don't have allegiance abilities anyway, so just give them that as an allegiance ability. They ignore the 0 to 3 rule. They should be the only army that ignores it, and it won't be a problem. It was
so depressing. It was so depressing when they took. That was the army that like needed the help, and it was the one that was like spamming. Like, sure,
it was having the. Yeah, but they were doing it in the bad way. Tzeentch was doing it in the annoying way. They were doing it in the awesome way.
Yeah, they were doing it for crowd control, and like that was their defense was -1 to hit. Like, you already had it built into the army. Like, you just stacked it as much as possible, and it was fun. It was funny to play against. It was kind of aggravating when you have witch elves that are hitting on 5s. I will say that. Yeah. I did do that for several times. Oh. But yeah, that was the one army that I was really sad for the endless spell change. Or make it so like you can only have 3 generic endless spells, and your faction endless spells don't count towards it. Like, I feel like there's a lot of things you could do to kind of make that better.
I overall like the 0 to 3 rule. I just think Gits should just get a allegiance ability that says you ignore this rule. We do it all the time with army rules. You can just say, you can, if you want to lock it behind a sub-faction, you lock it behind a sub-faction. If you want to do it as an allegiance ability, you just make it a base allegiance ability. And one of the big reasons for this is their endless spell box is one of the only ones that comes with more than 3. I think it might be the only one that comes with 4 spells. The rest have 3 as an army. They get 4.
Burning Mushroom, Scuttle Tide, and the Cauldron. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that.
And usually, look at the models for how they dictate the rules. Squad sizes, weapon allotments. It's almost always what's in the kit.
Absolutely.
They come with 4.
That was a change, because originally you could just have as many nets as you want until that book came out. So annoying.
Oh man, I have lost to some netters. I love skeletons, but boy, do they hate nets. Like, they just.
The way to, like, you might not beat Daughters of Cain, but you can get a moral victory making their witch elves hit on 5s or 6s.
Oh yeah.
And just like standing there cackling the entire time.
On the right battle plan, it's like 40k green carpet. It's just, you're not gonna win this game. I will like I might lose, but you're not gonna win. Like,
I mean, I think it's perfect for them because it's a book all about spite. Like, it is that it's perfect for one of my buddies, which is he was playing that for a while, and it was funny because that's basically what it was. Is if he was miserable, you were going to be miserable, and that was the entire game plan.
I like quirks like that in the game. I like some of that in our game. I really do. I think it's what gives the game the personality, which is why. You can't scrub away all the sharp edges and make it all the finely tuned machine that everyone wants it to be, like Magic the Gathering. We don't want that for our game. Getting back to some of these chat questions, because Soren was popping off with them. What were a couple we missed? What army would you want to see improve the most, and how? I think I know this answer. Is it Sylvaneth?
I mean, it's Sylvaneth.
It's Sylvaneth.
Like, an army that I haven't talked about constantly on here, Beasts of Chaos.
Hell yeah!
It's an army that I love the aesthetic. I love the lore. Like, the fact that they think they're better than all the slaves. Yeah, we've talked about it before.
Yeah, my slaves are on this shelf here. Right here.
The fact that they think they're better than the Chaos Gods, and so they don't want to bow to them, even though the Chaos Gods are controlling them. Great lore. I love it.
It's the Conan the Barbarian thing. It's like, to hell with you. Like, it's so good.
And I mean, it's minor tweaks for them. I think minor tweaks. I think catapult them forward, which I think is kind of a little bit of the issue is the way that army is designed. If they change too much, they're going to be so powerful because they're just going to have so many bodies on the table.
That's the thing is like you get through a list build and you'll be at like 1,500 points and you'll have like 120 bodies and you're just like, cool. Like I just want one awesome thing to spend that 500 points on that
yep.
You know, like one or two monsters that just are that force multiplier in the right way that you want to see. Like, I like that they don't have anvils, actually. I think that army should never have anvils. They really should just trade places with you. It's just their murder needs to be more.
Yeah, and I mean, that was kind of their lore, right? Was like, you literally go in and murder all of them, and then all of their friends come, and because they're all coming to the Hearthstone. That was the old lore for them. And I'd love, now that they brought back Sigvald, I'd love for them to bring like Malgars back and things like that. Like him being controlled by Tzeentch and having the spawn claw while he's fighting all of it. That was all great. I'd take him easily over Sigvald.
Yeah, hell yeah. I mean, I'm gonna buy into Sigvald. I already know that, but my Beasts of Chaos were that close to being Depraved Drove already, so this is just uniting the clans for me, man.
Yeah. I think the way to play them before was you just play Slaanesh and you play Slaanesh Dagors because those were the best Dagors.
I had a was it 50 best Dagor Depraved Drove list that I lined it up against a poor Skaven player, and I turned bottom of two, he was dead. I'm just like, I am so sorry. Mike Vaginas is not going to like that I'm telling this story, but that was basically the last round at ETC. That's what he was paired against, and it was better part of Valor, and I literally walk up to him and I'm like, just know that those Bestigors are moving 19 inches and then charging you. And he's like, yeah, I got it. And so he backs off the middle, and I walk back like a minute later, and I'm like, Mike, you know you've lost this game, right? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, he's literally just going to walk across in a line, and he doesn't even need to hit the middle. He just hits the side, and then he's going to pile into the middle, and now he's got all three of your objectives, and he's going to burn them in one turn. So instead of doing that, just make sure he doesn't get his secondaries, and you get all of yours. And that was literally what it was, and it was a minute into the game just based off deployment. Oh, man, the 19-inch threat, and then with the exploding sixes and sometimes fives, it just gave you that extra oomph those Bestigors want, you know? Oh, so sick. So sick. That army was fun once. I played it, but I looked across my opponent's face just the whole time as I wasn't even doing keeper spam. It uses heroes, but I think I had two keepers, and then I had the mask because it could keep up with the Bestigors a little bit to kind of project the locus, and that was kind of it. But it was just 50 Bestigors blazing fast, doing heavy lifting, and
I didn't end up but I think it was either Flying Monkey or the one in Omaha. I was gonna take essentially it was gonna be 2 blocks of Bestigors, 2 keepers, an Epitome, and then I think a Chariot or 2.
Oh yeah, Epitome, you gotta take Epitome. Yeah, 100%.
So it was the min Depraved Host, Depraved Host with as many Bestigors as I felt I could take, and then 2 keepers to kind of back them up, and then an Epitome, and then I also had the Mirror Endless spell because it was just janky.
This was the list that this was my list that had a beast lord kill a keeper of secrets in a different game. I lost that one, but he killed a keeper of secrets full to dead with a sort of judgment. I was being cheeky. I was being cute, and just full to dead at the keeper of secrets.
Yeah, I'm sad when they took away Sword of Judgment. It's a great equalizer in a lot of ways.
I love Hotspur's Beasts of Chaos. No gods, no managers. That's right. I love it. They're great. That's just the realization that they just got beaten by Beasts of Chaos. Beasts of Chaos are a fantastic. Their lore, their fluff, even their models are pretty sweet. They show a little bit of, they're a little dated. But
all their resin models need to be updated.
Yes.
Which, unfortunately, I think that means that they go away and they get new models that are different.
Yeah, fair enough. Like even though the resin the Beast Lord with the double axis looks pretty sweet. The wind's like the hair's blown in the wind and stuff. Like I don't know. It's a cool army. I can't. I've got a 2-army rule, and the loophole is if I convert them to Depraved Drove, they're Slanesh, and therefore I can collect Sigvald and.
Works for me.
Yeah, right. I don't have to sell them then if they're just Slanesh now.
I need that rule as much as anything else. If anybody needs a Flesh Eater Court army, let me know. I think I have like 80 ghouls new on Sprue.
There you go. I might actually take you up on that because Death is one army. You see.
That's true. It's Grand Alliance Death.
Yeah.
So I also have a Terrorgeist that I magnetized fairly well into a Terrorgeist or a Zombie Dragon.
That's actually pretty cool.
Switch between that. It's literally just a head swap.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Sorry, I got excited about Beasts of Chaos again. This happens to me sometime. What are the Soren? I missed a bunch of your questions. I'm sorry, bud. What do you see as an army that is not a hard counter to any army? I mean, there's probably a lot of armies that aren't hard counters to.
I mean, Gitz. Gitz is a soft counter to everybody. Anything that it's good against, and it's not a hard counter to anybody. Because you always hit on 6s.
Yeah, good answer. All right. G-Dad, yes. Flesh Eater Court's best faction. You can always sell the undead to make room. I think that might have been.
That one was for you.
I think that was for me as well. Disgusting. No, death is best. You don't sell your forever home. You sell the vacation home, not the forever home.
I have a case with 4 shelves on it, and there's just elves on all 4 shelves. Sylvaneth is at the bottom, and then Lumineth, and then Daughters of Cain, and then Deepkin at the top. And that is the shelf. That is the display case.
Are they shelved in order of which ones you like the most? Like the top shelf is your favorite, or?
Let's go with right now. They're other than Sylvaneth, it's what I like best painted wise. So my Daughters of Cain have not been touched or repainted since they beat Brendan Melnick at Adepticon 2 years ago.
Shade. Just a little.
Just throwing that out there in case. Hopefully he's still in chat, because otherwise I didn't want to do
that. I'll make sure he hears it.
No, so that army, it was going to be painted really well, and then I ended up taking a new job and didn't think I was going to Adepticon. And then my training schedule came out, and I just randomly had that Saturday off because I was basically retail support through corporate. And so my normal days off were Sunday, Monday, right? And so like Saturday was a normal day I worked, but for whatever reason it got left off the schedule. Whatever. So literally that Tuesday I get my schedule for training that week. It's not on the schedule. I go home that night, pay for a flight, and start painting my Daughters of Cain army. Just nights, because I was working 10 hours a day throughout that time period, and flew out Friday night, got to Chicago at 1 in the morning, and then woke up the next day and walked up and said, hey, can I play Age of Sigmar? Because obviously it was all sold out, because that's what Adepticon does.
Right. Oh, yeah, it sells out. Oh, what was it? It was something like an hour, 20 minutes last time? It was insane.
I was at an event. I was at an event down in Colorado Springs, and their Wi-Fi was shit, or was crap. So we couldn't get tickets. So I was on a wait list. But again, a big event like that, if you want to go, just go, because they're always going to have room. The average event has like a 10% drop rate. If anybody wants to do that math.
Yeah. No, just show up, just hang out. Good competitive tip there.
I've never been turned away. Let's put it that way. I showed up at LVO and did the same. No, I didn't this year for LVO. I did last year. This year, someone ended up selling the exclusive bundle for the same price as the regular ticket. So I'm like, all right, cool. I'll just buy that.
Yeah.
But I've stopped buying tickets before events, which is really bad, unless they're a friend of mine, because some of those events need money for venue before the actual event happens.
SAGT sold out in 2 minutes this year. Cheapers. It's of course an Australian event. Saggy T. That's Doom and Darkness's event, right? SAGT, I think. Kernigate, you can correct me on that. So much Twitter drama. I just haven't been paying attention, apparently, to Twitter drama. I just don't have the mental capacity, the mental bandwidth for drama right now. I'm just trying to get through my stuff. Before I transition to talking to you a little bit about ETC, any sort of like in general competitive AOS hot takes, stories, anecdotes you want to get out the way?
I don't think so.
I think we've been pretty thorough, as it were. I had a couple questions, but I'm going to wrap them into some ETC talk.
Sounds good.
So ETC, you said the first year was it 3? You were a coach, right?
Yep.
And then take me through that like a real quick. Just reset it.
So like I said, I met Bill. I met Bill. Like he actually knew who I was at Nova the year before. So that would have been ETC 2019. So that would have been Nova 2018. We ended up playing round 4. And like I said, he already knew Mike. I knew Mike. That's how I get to know people.
Link. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we had a fun game, just, joking around, went into it. Like, I ended up having, like, he saved 15 out of 16 of Marathi's attacks into a Terrorgeist damage off of just the feel no pain, not even the saves. Like, 16 went through, feel no pains. So that was basically game. I was also running Witch Elves at the time because they were fewer points than Sisters of Slaughter. Now it's all Sisters of Slaughter all times. Mm-hmm. At all times. If it's a big block, run Sisters of Slaughter. It's pro tip. So we were just having fun, just yelling at each other. And so then he ended up getting a group of us together in a chat. Like I said, Mike was the only person I knew in this. That's not true. I knew Joe Creer, but through other random events and stuff going on. But that was about it. I knew Mike, I knew Bill, and I knew Joe. And I would say there was probably about 10 of us in this group, and we were just talking about Age of Sigmar, just in general, not talking about ETC. It was just a group to hang out and chat in. And that was basically how Bill chose the ETC team that year. And the big reason is we didn't know if it was going to happen. That first year, there were 12 or 14 teams. I want to say 12. So when you're going into an experience like that, where especially for us, we're all over the country, we're traveling together for multiple practices, like meeting up in different cities. That year we did Chicago and Pittsburgh. And then we're traveling all the way over to Europe. Like, you want someone that you can rely on, right? Like, that was the biggest thing. So that's why, like, Bill didn't want to let anybody down by having them invest all this time and money and then have it not happen. Yeah. And then he also wanted to bring people he could trust because he didn't want to go all the way over to Europe and, like, have someone flake out last minute and ruin it for everybody else. So it was kind of twofold. It was protecting him and protecting everybody else in his mindset.
I can see his thing. My only interactions with Bill have been digital, but when I sort of started out in Age of Sigmar community, I was on TGA a bunch, and he was, as a sort of death faithful type player, I always run into him in the death, sort of section of the forums. He was always super nice to me. Always took his time to explain, like, if there was like he was on Flesh Eater Courts when it was bad at that weird, like, in between period. I'm like, how are you winning with this? And he would just sit there and he would talk to me because I'm like, my puzzle brain is like.
Well, it turns out when Slanesh learned this very well the next year, when you have 4,000 points on the table,
yes,
and keep getting more, it turns out that that's usually pretty good.
Yeah.
And so infinite ghouls is how Bill was.
Yeah.
And it was really funny because he actually had a janky list that was really good that he took to Nova that year. And then he got Nagashed 3 times. So he had to play against Nagash, and Nagash handed dusted. When he played against Will Suhili, he literally 3 turns in a row, Hand of Dust the Terrorgeist, Hand of Dust the Terrorgeist, Hand of Dust Arcan. Like 3 turns in a row. Because I think it was that many. And it was just awful. So he actually changed from his Nova list, which was lots of jank, to the LVO list that year that won overall with just like having, he literally had Tupperwares full of ghouls because he was just putting 4d6 ghouls out a turn.
What was interesting about his list is the core of the list was running flayers, as I recall, which was what was the weird part to me.
Horrors.
What was that?
It was horrors usually.
Yeah.
He did summon flayers occasionally if he needed something that was fast moving to get around the table.
That's what it was. It was the horrors thing that threw me for a loop looking at it, and I'm just like running the core of horrors, and I'm like, obviously he's going to summon on this stuff, but I'm like, it was awesome. But again, like I'm a nobody I still feel like I'm a relative nobody, but I'm literally just a rando on an internet forum that you've never heard of, you don't know the real name of, asking him questions like on like practically daily, and he just always had time for me. So I was always like, this dude's pretty cool. But I really only know him by reputation. I know he doesn't.
Even if Bill Sousa hates you, he's still going to be nice to you. That's just who he is as a person.
Well, that reassures me.
Okay, so here is actually an anecdote. So like I said, that was Nova that year is when I really got to know Bill. I met him the LVO before that, because Mike already knew him, and I was friends with Mike, and so I ended up dropping after round 3 because my grandma actually passed away. Sad story, but we'll move past it. I have. So I dropped. I just didn't feel like playing. My very next game, funnily enough, was against Joe Career, and he was playing 200 horrors in Change Host, and I just didn't feel like dealing with it. So I said, hey, Joe, I'm just dropping. For those of you that don't like Joe Career, I did make him deploy his entire army before I conceded. So that was pretty funny, because he was playing 1-drop Change Host. So a little fun there.
Just to spite him a little bit.
Oh, yeah, just to spite a little bit, because that's who I am. So I went and watched Bill play the next day, and he was playing, I don't know who he was playing against, but he was playing against Croaknado at the time. And
old Croaknado, the
old Croaknado.
Yeah.
Yep. That was actually the same event I met Andrew Standiford as well. So I was kind of moving between those two games, hanging out with both of them a little bit. I knew Andrew better at that point, so mostly hanging out with Andrew. But I kept going over to Bill's game. I think it was like bottom of 3 or something like that. His opponent, so you can't win. So do you just want to call this? And Bill just gave him a big smile, and he says, "What do you mean I can't win?" And he's like, "Well, I'm going to do this, 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 and this, and you can't come back on points." And he's like, "Oh, I don't know. Maybe I can. Maybe we should just roll it out and figure it out." And big smile on his face the entire time. But you could see it. So Bill plays without shoes on all the time. But he's usually sitting down. He's sitting down most games.
Weird.
Yeah. Bill literally stands up at that point, after he said, "Let's just roll it out," and physically pulls up his pants, and then starts playing the game. He ends up pulling out that game, and ever since then, I've called that Bill pulling on his tryhard pants, because Bill is not that person. He's not the person that cares enough to argue about calls or anything like that. But this guy was so arrogant, and Bill could not win this game. Bill was so I wouldn't say furious, but indignant. Oh, really? You don't think so? You're about to see what's going to happen. And literally stands up, pulls up his pants, and plays that game out and wins that game by chaining out a unit of plague monks all the way across the board in the most weird fashion ever, and winning that game. And that was probably my favorite Age of Sigmar anecdote, and it's about Bill Sousa.
That's amazing. No, I have this setting too. I call it the "oh really" moment. So there's it's a Seinfeld story where he talked about how the comedian on that opened a show for him introduced him as it's the funniest man in the world, Jerry Seinfeld. And the whole audience collectively leaned back and went, "Oh, really?" And he bombed. And so there's just that something that happens. It's in the lizard brain when somebody is that indignant toward you. Like, I could just feel my brain cross its arms and go, oh, really?
Yeah.
And I had... Go ahead.
No, that was basically it. Go for it.
No, I had this moment where somebody was like, I'm not proud of it, but it was a tournament, and they're like, oh, like, you know, how you doing, man? And they gave me what I call, like, the Eeyore, you know? Where I was like, and I don't normally do this. I think it's not me. But they I walked up to the table, and I'm doing my general thing. I'm, like, holding my Nagash, and I go, oh, like, how's it going? And they're like, oh, man, like, not good. But it wasn't like a, oh, man, not good. It was like, oh, not good. I just brought the wrong army, and today sucks. And, like, I'm not even going to have fun. And my brain just went like, oh, really? And I'm like, you're right, you're not going to have fucking fun. Like, I just, like, I don't know. Like, just flip that switch. I mean, I guess that's the opposite of someone telling me that I can't beat them.
So I'm the opposite way with that. If I walk up to a table and you get, like, disheartened, I'm going to try everything in my fucking power for us to have fun.
Yes.
And then if I can't, then I'm like, okay, whatever.
I'll just
Because then I don't
quickly.
feel bad afterwards. If I'm joking around with you the entire time and, like, you know, I'll make weird charges or, like, I'm just joking around the entire time. Like, once I have a game in hand, I'll just start messing around, which I could see as being construed as bad. But, like, I love charging 25mm bases in between 25mm bases and having the units strung in between each other. It's just a fun little quirk. Mm-hmm. But I'll try my hardest to get you to have fun and joke around, because then at that point, if you're still not doing it, I know it's not my fault.
Yeah, well, I mean, I usually I'm like that, because it's like I go into most games wanting you to have a good game as my, like, main motivation is usually, like, I want us to have a great game.
Yep.
It's from my professional wrestling training. The first rule of wrestling is you help your opponent have a good match. Mm-hmm. And then the second rule of wrestling is you have a good match. And if the third rule is if you've done rule 1 and rule 2, you will have a good match.
Okay.
So, like, that comes into my mind when I play. I've talked about this before. I have, like, a wrestling persona. Mr. Mephisto is, like, my persona that I go into at the table, and I'm, like, talking shit and, like, the whole time. Like, I have my opponents, like, cheer my charges and stuff, and I'm like, don't cheer that fucking charge. No, you should be upset about that charge. I just made a 12-inch charge. I'm in your face. Like, I go full, like, heel mode, because I'm trying to, like, get them out of that, like, I don't want them to ever think they have to be fake nice with me and stuff, and, like, I'm like, I need your anger to be happy, and, you know, so I get into this banter mode. But it comes from that wrestling training of, like, your opponent has a good match, you have a good match, or your opponent has a good match, you make the match good, then you will have a good match. And so I go into it that way, but for whatever reason, that one day that guy's just like, he just said it in the right tone, and my lizard brain just, like, electrocuted awake, and I'm like, you're right, I'm going to crush you. And I felt the need to crush this one human once. And I felt horrible about it ever since, and I've never shared this story before now. It was
exactly that feeling afterwards is why I can't do that. Like, as much as I like, so it's one of those things where I try to make the best first. It's really weird. I try to make the best first impression possible, and then once we get to know each other, I don't really care. Like, I'm just gonna joke around and have fun, and, like, not that I don't care about you as a person, but, like, I let all my guard down, and I'll just be as sarcastic as I want to. I'll, you know, make offhand jokes, things like that. Yeah, so it's really guarded originally, and then I'll just. So it kind of goes into LVO this past year. My game in the semifinals was against Will Sahili, and we know each other pretty well. Anyone that didn't know me watching that game, I have no idea what they would have thought, because I was literally yelling at Will the entire time. Not angrily, just like, we all know you're going to fucking do it. Let's just do it. He was playing Celeste Slanesh, and he was the one that won the whole event. And he won it because by chaining out, let's see, it was 3 heralds, 2 harps, and a chariot from a Keeper of Secrets with 1 wound left on a hero scoring mission. That on turn, if I won turn 5, I win. If he wins priority turn 5, he charges my Grayseer and kills it and wins. And that's what happens. Is he rolled that turn 5. But, like, on turn 4 when he did all the summoning, he ended up failing the charge into the Grace here, which was funny. But he's like, so I can do it. Like, do you just want to shake hands? I'm like, fuck no. And I sit down and I tell him, we all know what you're going to do. We just want to see you do this bullshit. And I'm having fun with him, and he's having fun with me, but I can't even imagine what everybody watching that game was thinking. Because I literally had a yellow die, because that was the joke this past year was yellow cards. Because they were giving out yellow cards for like late list submission and things like that, but they were literally meaningless. So every time he like didn't measure something and moved too far, or deep struck too close, or things like that, I had a big yellow die that I just kept turning up.
The shade, I love this.
Yeah, so we were just having fun the entire game, and it was a blast. That was probably one of my favorite Age of Sigmar games I've had so far.
What do you think? What do you think enables something like that, like in Age of Sigmar? Because I can't think of. I've got one story of having that much fun in Magic the Gathering at a real tournament. One story like that. Is it the social nature of the game? Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the social nature of the game. You've got the community aspect to it. Like I said, I don't think I wouldn't have felt comfortable doing that with anybody else that I didn't know.
That's fair.
That even some people that I do know, I don't think I could do that with. I've known Joe Kerr for 3-4 years now. I don't think I could do that with him.
Yeah.
I think he would either get in his head or get mad at me or whatever. But Will is just that personality that is like always smiling, always laughing, no matter what you do. So I know I can yell at him.
Well, there's. Go ahead.
So that's part of it. It's just the community aspect of it.
Well, I mean, when you go to a competitive event, and this is, when you go to a competitive event, you have to build fast rapport with people. This goes back to like when you play in your region, you get to develop rapport over several tournaments. But I do think there's a little bit of the Fight Club or boxing manifesto of you don't know somebody till you fight them type thing. Like you can build a ton of rapport with people, but you don't until you actually play them on the table. You don't fully know them, and to build fast rapport in a moment of that sort of turn zero where you show up and you swap lists and you're like, how's your tournament going so far? Hey, is this your first one? Or I know you, so I know it's not your first one. Like all that stuff to get to that fast rapport to kind of be as much yourself as you can be in a play environment. That for me is what's awesome about Age of Sigmar. I don't know.
Yeah. I've never really seen in reality, I've never seen anything that's the same way. The 40K scene is not that way. And that's what I tell people. Like, I know a lot of people don't go to major cons where you have multiple events happening at the same time. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are just going to like, hey, I'm going to a 2-day Age of Sigmar event or whatever. But playing Age of Sigmar and walking into the 40K room where you just hear at the same time 7 different people around the room yelling Judge, that doesn't happen in the Age of Sigmar room. Like, we figure it out, and it's really special. I don't know what causes that, and it's a really interesting situation.
Yeah, cool. I mean, I'm with you. I didn't. My 40K experiences were all LGS stuff, so I really can't comment on tournament 40K. But I know that experience is sitting down with headphone guy. I talk about in the Magic. They come up to the Magic the Gathering. They're wearing their headphones. They shake your hand. They never say a word to you, and they just play the game. If I'm not memeing on it, it's cool that Magic the Gathering is a game where we don't need to share a common language. We can play it that way. But I can't fathom headphone guy in Age of Sigmar. Like, it doesn't
work. As much as anything else, like, I'm not going to try to count your dice. I need you to tell me how many hits you got. Like,
yeah,
it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Or that's the other one. Like, it's an interesting thing because, like, in the 40K room, you'll never roll your opponent's dice ever. But I don't know how many times, like, I've rolled Plague Monks or Witch Elves, and it's like 60 dice, and I'm like, here's my wounds. Roll that. And, like, it's one of those things, I don't care about my dice. Like, it's whatever. I know they're fine. So you can roll my dice. If someone says, no, I want to roll my own dice, fine. But I'm going to give you the offer. Like, I don't want to count these. Don't make me count these. Just roll my dice. It already gives us the answer.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's an interesting experience. It's an interesting difference between the two rooms. It really is.
Really? So, can I have you go on record here? You can just blink twice if you don't want to answer. Which do you prefer, 40K or Age of Sigmar, tournament wise?
Age of Sigmar.
100%. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
you don't even
not
think.
Not even a question. If I play in 40K events, it'll be local events that like I said, don't have an Age of Sigmar aspect to them. It's a social event at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to hang out with buddies, so I don't care about 40. Like, I want to win if I'm playing. Don't get me wrong, because as it goes back to earlier, it's just that's the way it is. So if I'm going to do it, I'm going to try to do it well, but I don't care nearly as much about it as I do about the Age of Sigmar as a game.
That's fair. That's super fair. I mean, this is the question that caused me to make RantCast and has had me just enamored with the Age of Sigmar community. Is what makes this game different, what makes it special. And I feel like every RantCast I'm trying to put my finger on it, and I never quite figure it out. There's just, I don't know. Part of it is, I think, where I am at my stage in life of they say that like the only places you really make friends are work and school, and then after that you're just. But with Age of Sigmar, I've made friends and I've defied that, and
it's another.
And I don't know, man, it's crazy.
I mean, I don't know this for sure, but I think one of the things it could be is I know a lot of the top 40K players through like ETC and stuff like that, because we hung out with the 40K team a decent amount while we were over there. I feel like the top players in the 40K scene are more insular than they are in the Age of Sigmar scene, and it might be just the size of the 40K community that they're very insular within themselves, where like if you don't know them, they might not open up to you as much. Whereas like if anybody walks up to me and asks me a question, I'm going to answer the question. Like, hey, what do you do if this happens or this happens? Well, here you go. This is what I do. And that might be the difference, is we're smaller, so we're kind of forced to get to know everybody.
Yeah.
And engage with everybody. So, I mean, that's a possibility. But, I mean, I would say a lot of the people that I see on national, like at major events, a lot of the top players are the top players in most of those events. Mm-hmm. But they don't hang out with each other and just block out everybody else. Everybody's kind of grouped together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. So I want to, you kind of moved into talking about ETC. So you sort of talked about how Souza sort of sculpted the team sort of
that first year.
Going forward, obviously, then that would have been the sort of phantom year, the COVID year, right?
Yep.
How he went into actually like sort of taking applications. I know Jake from our area made the tournament, and that was like the year that he kind of we don't have a what's it called in horse racing, the triple crown.
Triple crown.
He sort of like had his triple crown year, where he got his hobby score, he got his hobby award, he got his sports award, and he got his like big tournament. Like he actually rattled off big tournament wins, like he got 2 or 3 of them. So he had kind of his triple crown year. Seemed like a shoo-in from my perspective to make the ETC team. How did he go into selecting that? Because like he obviously, he's not playing every single Midwest tournament, let alone every tournament across the.
Well, and it's kind of funny because we kind of mentioned this before, where the Midwest is kind of a bubble, right?
Yeah.
So like you could win every event in the Midwest and not go to Adepticon, and I might not know who you are. Just because like that's just the reality of the situation is if I don't follow the right people on Twitter, or like follow the right people, or like spend all the time on the TGA community, I just don't know about it. Like that's kind of the unfortunate situation. The ones we really get viewpoints on are Adepticon, LVO, and Nova. Those are the ones that are just kind of natural universal. And I think Texas is trying to do it with WarGamesCon, which gets into issues with their master's program, which I've discussed with some of the people that are involved with that hopefully they're going to try to make it a little better. But
I'm not familiar with this at all. I got to touch base with Jeremy Cooper.
Oh, it was someone linked it in chat earlier. The Texas Masters group.
Mm-hmm.
They basically have a GT in all the major cities in Texas, and then multiple RTTs in all the major cities in Texas, and they have their own like point scoring system. But they were doing a really good job of trying to promote outside of Texas. And then it's almost like they slammed the door on everybody else, where they wanted to, like, they were trying to shut everybody out that wasn't part of the Masters circuit type thing. which was kind of unfortunate. So
I think it has to do with one of the gentlemen who was kind of in charge of things stepped down, and then it was left open to the.
So I love John. I know John because I went down to Wargames Con. So John Kanapke was fucking awesome. That was the biggest namesay that I knew in the Texas community, and that's one of the reasons I went down to Wargames Con. Mike was actually living down in the Dallas area, so that's what really got me down there. But I met John there, and he kept in the loop with him. But I have another buddy that's down there now that's trying to get more involved to kind of pick up that slack.
Yeah, so this is where we just need community ambassadors that flit about. No, I think that the autocracy of a system like that takes over when the person spearheading it steps down. That's giving it the sort of that's giving it the personal sort of free will aspect, and then once that person driving that steps down and goes and does a different thing for personal life reasons, whatever's going on, you just got to step away from Age of Sigmar for a little bit.
And John was friends with all of the Iron Realms guys down in Oklahoma and the Flying Monkey guys up in Kansas. He was friends with all them too, so that's part of the reason he wanted to go into ITC and kind of expand out and bring people in, is because he did know people outside just the Texas area and wanted them to be included and bring people into that community.
Yeah.
So I hopefully they open back up a little bit, but getting back to the point.
I have faith that they will. I know a few of them kind of on the inner circuit. They will.
I hope so. I know Garrett and a couple other guys went down to Wargames Con last year. I wanted to, because it's like a $50 flight to Dallas, and then I have someone that can drive me down. Unfortunately, it was the week after ETC last year, and I stayed in the UK after ETC, so I couldn't make it work.
You gotta do some touring, man.
Yeah, I actually have friends over there, so I went and stayed over there with them. But yeah, so anyway, get back to it. Jake could have won everything that wasn't Adepticon. We still might not know who he was. Jake and Sean. Jake, I know for sure. I think Sean was also there. Ran into Bill the year before at the Michigan GT. And so they had talked quite a bit and kind of stayed in communication between the whole thing. And then it was something we had talked about the year before, was once we kind of got this settled and hey, this is going to keep going, that's when Bill released the application in 2020. So I went through the application process. Every single person that was on the team in 2019, other than Bill, went through the application process again. And that's when you saw Roger stayed on as coach, Sam was a player, and then I went from coach to player. We had 3 plus Bill out of the 7 of us that were carryovers from the year before, and we brought on 3 new people, which were Chai Zola, Jake, and Jeremy. Jeremy, kind of that year's LVO, kind of hung out with us a decent amount more, and then he and Bill played in round 5 or something like that. And then Chai, I was standing next to for 2 rounds at Adepticon, and he ended up leapfrogging me. And then we played some other time. I think it was at Nova or something. So I knew Chai pretty well and things like that. So it was kind of a hybrid between the two, right? Because it was people that we knew and some people we didn't know that well. We didn't know any of those 3 that well, but they submitted their applications. They obviously had their resume behind it. And again, we brought 10 people into a chat, and we just spent 2 or 3 months talking. And it was just sometimes it was about football. Sometimes it wasn't even about Age of Sigmar, but it was just seeing who could vibe.
Did any Packers fans make the final roster? I'm just. You can just go on. You don't need to answer. Go on.
I think Sean and Jake are for some reason Bears fans, aren't they?
Yeah, it's sad.
I'm surprised they just
both
haven't
live in Michigan. I understand not being Lions fans, but come on.
I thought you would still get stabbed in Detroit for not being a Lions fan.
Detroit's actually a super chill city. It's just that they're they just watch the industry collapse around them and create a whole a weird vacuum. No, I went to when I was still on the fighter game circuit and stuff. Umicon is sort of viewed as the big tune-up for their big tournament season with Capcom Cup and all the big stuff for fighters. Super chill. but like you're super relegated to just kind of like the downtown area, and
Yeah.
so I never got to see like the rest of Detroit. But everyone I encountered over a convention weekend was pretty awesome. So,
Yeah, no, I do not believe there are any Packers fans. Or yeah,
it like right at the top of my list. This is why I'm not ETC team captain.
well, well, just to get Bill and I hated more, we're both huge Patriots fans.
Oh, man. I liked you all the way until right now.
And I'm okay with it. Doesn't
It was
affect
like
me
I
whatsoever.
liked you all the way until right now.
That's fine.
No, I'm kidding. The reason I love competitive sports as a fan is because it's something you can have a rooting interest in without anything else that matters going on. Like
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
can like we can just make a fake rivalry right now over whose sports ball team is cooler, and like it doesn't change.
It doesn't matter outside of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that about sports. We can talk shit, like we get all of the enjoyment of all those things of having a competitive thing has without any of the problems.
Oh, I do the same thing in Age of Sigmar communities by making fun of dwarves. I do it constantly.
Oh yeah.
Someone was playing KO right when they got their 15% drop in points, and I changed their name in that Discord to Stupid Dwarf Player. Stuff like that. Like I was just he was posting like chain posting KO lists. I'm like, well, your biggest issue is there's way too many dwarves in it. Stuff like that. So like, it's the same idea, right? It's creating a fake rivalry between elves and dwarves that doesn't really exist in any mind except mine and his.
Right.
It's still just having fun with it.
Right. And Kicker says this explains the Blood Bowl team name. Yes, mine is the Scream Bay Hackers. Is the name of my Blood Bowl team.
Yeah, I lost 3 blitzers in a row in the playoffs last season. Didn't feel like playing my New England Patriots anymore.
That explains the name too.
And that's what it is, right? Like I can acknowledge that I'll argue with the cheating thing from here until
because you have to be a homer for a little bit, yeah.
And I don't think they actually it's whatever. But I'm gonna lean into it because I think it's fun.
And it makes people angry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you had people talking about Foggate or Raingate this year when it started just pouring rain during the last drive for Lamar Jackson in that Ravens Patriots game. It's stuff like that it's hilarious. Like, and there were commentators after the game. Does Bill Belichick have a rain machine? Like,
that's funny. That's just great. That's just funny. That's entertaining. I like the I don't know, like that's why like I'm a death homer, and like why I like go super hard in the paint and like death is best, and that's what I'm doing there. It's the same principle, just creating like sort of a this team jokey rivalry, because again in all of that with a fictional universe. Now yeah, I know there are some crazy people out there that can take fiction way too far and do some bad stuff, but that's not the average reality, the aggregate reality of like harmless banter about games and Nagash is the coolest, no Archeon's the coolest, right? Like, yeah, we just get to have fun with that. So you had like sort of a pseudo familiarity, and you almost might like meeting at the sort of cross-pollinating the different tournaments and stuff and meeting each other almost as like the interview process of having a resume from the
yeah, but it's also it's not like there's not just a singular relationship there, right? It's not just a boss employee employer relationship. It's also team chemistry. If you think about the fact that like you're flying halfway across the world with these guys, like they're also going to be guys that you want to have fun with, right? Like you're going out to dinner every night. You're spending all day together the entire time, and then you're going out together at night. Like they're people you actually want to hang out with. So that's kind of part of that. As well as the whole like wanting to know that you're not going to take a risk on a boxcar's charge when you don't really need it, things like that. So as much as it is the gameplay side of it and wanting to be able to trust you on the table because we are a team, it's also I want to be able to hang out with you when I'm going to Europe with you.
See, I didn't even in terms of like watching it unfold on Twitter and like, oh, this is the team, and from last year's team, and
yeah.
The sort of fallout of a little bit of the drama from the initial sort of inception team. I didn't even think about like team chemistry as a thing. I'm like, oh yeah, you just take the 5 best players with the best scores. You know, like my brain didn't even register. I'm like, just take the best ones. Like whatever quantifiable thing you decide is your parameters for who the best are. I didn't think about, you know, having a chat with 10 people and then screening it down from there just to see who jives the most and who's going to schedule the most, get in line. Yeah, I don't know.
So I'd say the biggest thing I would a lot of people don't consider is it's not, you're not necessarily going to ETC to try to win 6 games every single round every single time, because that's not necessarily realistic.
Well, someone's got a caboose.
Yeah. So like you have to. So one, you have to be able to throw someone under a bus and not have them have any issue, like mad or sportsmanship issues at the table, or like trying to take a risk when they're supposed to just be getting their secondaries and we don't need anything else. Things like that. So you want to know their demeanor at the table, number one. And number 2, you also want to know play styles. So there's this kind of gets more into the ETC high level stuff, which is cool to talk about. But like, there's a couple different mindsets. One is going in kind of like what Team England did that year, where they brought the 6 best GT lists that they could possibly bring. Any of those lists could go to a GT and go 4-1, maybe 5-0 if they got a little bit lucky. That was kind of the idea behind it. Whereas we brought some lists that weren't necessarily intuitive, but they allowed us to trap people. So that's what we kind of did that year in that meta. We took a look at the meta that year and saw that everything was very melee based. Whether it was Keepers of Secrets, even before they got nerfed, you had Skaven Plague Monks, Terrorgeists. You know, the boogeymen in the meta were all melee based and had no real shooting defense. So that's where you see us take a list like Free Guild, because it was a janky shooting army that no one really had insight to, and it got an Overwatch mechanic to shoot off the charge.
You all had a Beast of Chaos army there too, didn't you?
Sort of. It was a Zinch army. That was Joe.
That's what it was.
Was it? I think it was Zinch. It was something. That was mostly, like, we had a core where it was an 1830 list, which was a fairly meta list at the time. It was 18 Enlightened, 30 Zangors. And then it was getting summoning from there for scoring. So you had a hammer and anvil kind of in those 2 units, and then your scoring units you could bring in later on.
That's what it was.
So that was kind of the idea behind that. But that was kind of the idea we had going into it, is we had 2 kind of trap lists that were unique that no one is really used to, between Shootcast at the time and Free Guild. And both of them had ways to deal with getting charged. Both of them had ways to just deal with a lot of the meta armies at the time.
Do you think that and I know hindsight is 20/20, do you think that you were too clever? Do you think you learned a lesson from that? I don't want to know what your strategy is, because I don't want to USA, we're not ruining your chances going forward with any tech, but...
So I will say the meta's a lot more balanced right now than it was before, whether it's armies that can reliably charge out a deep strike, like Eels and Marauders and things like that, versus shooting meta like KO and bridging dwarves and all that nonsense. So it's a lot more balanced right now. So this is more the thought going into 2019 than it was even going into 2020. So going into 2019, we were basically able to trap, because the way that process works for your viewers that don't really know.
Oh yeah, do you want to explain? Yeah, explain the team format real quick.
So you both have 6 teams, right? And,
I guess we should have started by mentioning what ETC is.
Yeah, ETC, European tournaments, team championships. Basically, in 2019, it was 12 teams from around the world got together. It was really us in Europe, and we just played Age of Sigmar for a weekend, and it was easily the best Age of Sigmar event I've ever been to. Never have an experience like it. Met amazing people all over the world that I still talk to this day. So it was great.
Australia's in now. Woo!
Australia, New Zealand, Canada. I think we're up over 24 teams now.
Amazing.
So it shot way up. So it's going to be even more fun meeting even more people now. So
it's like the Olympics of Age of Sigmar, really.
Yeah, it kind of is, even though it's European instead of world, which that's 40K drama. But, you know, whatever. Anyway, we ended up getting second. I was unhappy with that because I wanted us to get first, and that's who I am as a person.
I wanted you to get first too. USA is USA. Let's go.
Yeah.
Come on.
I even put that in my application for 2020. I was disappointed with our second place finish in 2019. So basically, when you get to the table, there's a half an hour pairing phase, and it's kind of
awesome. Like the pairing phase is like this totally cerebral. I'll let you explain what it is, but there's a lot of us out there that think the team format is kind of just like peak Warhammer.
Yeah, it is the game. So, we kind of stepped past the question earlier, but so where the kind of randomness and strategy is in a normal GT is the randomness or like the preparedness you get around knowing what mission you're going to be playing. What it is in the team format in like ETC style teams is in the pairing process. So this is probably one of the things we worked on more than anything else. Like as much as we played games, we couldn't really play that much because we were halfway across the country from each other. So we had a couple practices in person where we literally just jammed games the entire weekend. And what we were doing a lot online is we were practicing pairings. So basically the way it works is I have 6 cards. I place one card face down. The other country places their card face down. We flip them at the same time, and that's a defender list. Now each team gets to choose 2 attackers that they placed face down on their opponents that are going to be attacking that list. And again, everything's kind of hidden, so you only know what's been face up so far. So you take those 2, you choose between those 2 which you want to face with your defender. You pick one of them, the other card gets handed back to them. Your opponent does the same thing. So that's how you know matchup number 1 and number 2. And you basically keep doing that all the way through until the cards that are left over are what pair against each other. So
you can essentially be holding on to like your money. So you could have like that sort of 6 card can just be like this is the money, this is the home run, right?
Or so it's whatever they didn't choose to defend against in the last round of pairings, right? So it's whatever's left over is playing whatever's left over from your last pairing.
But you could be holding a card until that second to last pairing. That's like the secret money card, right?
Yeah. So that's kind of where I mentioned trapping someone, right? Is them throwing down a defender that has 2 hard counters that you happen to have in your hand. You throw both hard counters against them, and now they're going to have to choose the lesser of 2 evils. Mm-hmm. So that's trapping someone. The other way is just to have 6 of the best GT lists possible and have everything be a die roll, and whoever and hoping that 4 out of your players do a better job than 4 out of their players, right. 4 out of their 6 players. Right. So it's kind of 2 different ideas. One is playing more as a team, and one is playing more as 6 individual players that are all just trying to win their games. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the there's a few different mentalities. That's 2 of them. Mm-hmm. And then the other part of that is you go in order of who was chosen for picking tables, which missions were static to a table and terrain was static to a table. So
missions as in battle plans, like literally you could be playing 6 different battle plans across the team.
So it was each battle plan was played twice across the team, 3 battle plans per round.
Okay.
And you knew which battle plans were happening round 1, round 2, round 3, round 4, round 5, round 6. So 2 of your team are going to be playing each of those 3 battle plans, right? So and so you know that first pairing is playing mission number 1. That second pairing is playing mission number 2. That third pairing is playing mission number 3. And so then
you could try to do your deal your cards out for the mission as well. So that would be like a third strategy.
You're absolutely having to do that, right? So if you get a hero scoring mission and all you have left in your hand is, I don't know, Gloomspite Gits and KO, or Fire Slayers maybe, like you might have a hard time if they have a shooting matchup against you, right? So you knew, like you could kind of tell going into it, and that's some of the planning, is knowing which of your opponent's armies are going to have to go into which mission just based on what missions they're good against. So there was some of that as well. So you're pairing against the mission, you're pairing against the opponent, which you don't have any knowledge about what they're going to be pairing either. So it's a big convoluted process that is absolutely amazing, and it's a lot of fun. That is probably what I had the most fun doing.
I love that it's basically cards. You're literally saying this is poker now. You know, like
basically.
You're playing. It's totally like it's just the bluffing part of poker, which is fantastic.
Yep. So we ended up against Team England, for example. We ended up getting our shoot cast against their Bone Splitters list, which that Bone Splitters list beat everybody else in the event. So we tried to figure out which of our lists was going to actually be able to beat it, and if there was one, and if not, who we were going to throw into the bus to get better matchups everywhere else.
This is what I've also heard people call this the caboose, like the person that you throw under the bus.
Throw under the bus, yeah. But we figured out how Byron played that list was he basically just sent a wave across the table. And so when he sent that wave across the table, there was going to be a gap in the middle. So our Stormcast list was going to be able to drop in the middle and just shoot the rest of it off the table. So we ended up trapping that Bone Splitters list into the last pairing by just not choosing it ever. So we ended up pushing that all the way to the last pairing, and that's what they were forced to go with because they never wanted that to be a defender list because then we could throw someone under the bus. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what we did pairing against that. And that's kind of the school of thought on how that pairing process goes. But it's a lot of fun. I know ATC was going to that. That's the American Team Championship for everyone out there. That was going to happen in
we had one.
Tuscaloosa.
We had
one. There was one. It was going to be better this year when they moved it up a little bit until it couldn't happen because COVID, like everything else. Unfortunately, it got pushed back next year, so I don't know that I'll be able to go if ETC is happening.
Yeah.
We'll see.
All right. We're going to have tournaments. We're going to play them. It's going to be 2021 is going to be markedly better than 2020, and we'll figure out the logistics in between, right?
Everything's going to be available, and then they're all going to be too close to ETC, so I can't go to them anyway. So that's everybody else can have fun.
More for me.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So yeah, that was kind of the first year, and then the final process of that is then you. The other part of that 30 minutes is you choose secondaries. So we literally had the table of Games Workshop's agendas, and they matched up perfectly to give each person 2 secondaries, right? There were 12 of them at the time. So your team had all 12 agendas, and you just had to get all of them accomplished. So that's basically what I did after I finished pairings was I went around, and the way we did it is we kind of had secondaries that everyone went into thinking, hey, if I don't hear anything else, these are my secondaries. And then I was going around hot swapping them based on Sam played Legion against Legions Nagash one time. He's not going to make guys run away due to bravery. So now he's losing that secondary, and we're giving it to someone else that can actually score it. Right. So that's kind of how we went into that process. So that was a lot of fun. It was just a lot of fun in general. And then then you play your games just like you would any other Age of Sigmar game, and you hope your teammates do the right thing as well and win. There's some kind of coaching that's now going to be allowed where you can be like, hey, you don't need to win this game. We're good everywhere else. Just push hard and get your secondaries. Stop them from getting their secondaries. You can do a little bit more with that now. Your players are going to be able to ask questions a little bit more, bounce ideas off of
the coaches
a little bit more. Yeah. Whereas what the first year they weren't really supposed to do that. Coaching was a lot more of the
behind the scenes.
Yeah, and then also kind of like if your captain was a playing captain, you were also kind of the go-between between the TOs and all that other stuff. Mm-hmm. And then figuring. I did a lot. Most of what I did was pairing stuff.
The joke was that you're the one who gets the beer when you're the coach.
I did that a lot. Usually that meant if I didn't have a beer, that meant the player was also buying me a beer. So it worked out for me.
Good. How are beer prices in Europe versus America?
Well, we were in Serbia, so they were dirt cheap. It
Nice.
was the greatest experience ever.
Nice.
We taxied everywhere, and I don't think we ever, collectively as a car, ever paid more than $3 for a taxi.
Nice. There's that.
It was pretty great.
So I guess this question that keeps coming up is like, well, what about the pack? What about the knowing the battle plans? How does that come about? Like, how do you how did it, like, is Games Workshop just making the pack for ETC and then like boom, that's what you get, or how does that come up?
Games Workshop just for the first time acknowledged ETC as an event this past year, which is kind of understandable. Ninth Age is an event at ETC as a carryover from old Warhammer Fantasy Battle, right. And Games Workshop kind of made a hardline stance that they were not supporting Ninth Age for the people that kept doing that. So I got it. But yeah, they did acknowledge us this year, which was a lot of fun, or was really cool to see. But no, so the pack, just like with most other events, right? Like we have a GHB. We have a GHB to do 99% of it, and then the rest of it is voted on by captains. So whether or not, a certain FAQ is going to be in it, when the cutoff is, when anything else is going to be happening, that's all voted on by the captains for like one-off things, and then they vote on a final packet that is going to rule everything at the end of the day. So, 2019 is the best example just because we actually went through with that event. That event, we decided that because lists were due at the end of May, had to be checked by the end of June. The General's Handbook was going to be coming out mid-June, so somewhere around there. So we weren't going to be able to play with the new General's Handbook. So then we had to decide if we were going to play any FAQs of it, because Forbidden Power came out a little bit before that, proceeding into that General's Handbook. So we decided to play with the FAQs for Forbidden Power, but not any of the General's Handbook rules, even though they all released at the same time. So that was all voted on by the Captain's Council and decided on by everyone collectively. So there is no like gotchas or anything like that, because theoretically everyone knows the consistent packet going in months and months before they submit their lists. One downfall of that is I know there was a lot of talk about like play testers and things like that this past year going into ETC. It really doesn't matter much as long as the Captain's Council is doing what they're supposed to do, because like that FAQ for Forbidden Powers, if they had just voted that out, everybody, the only thing that the playtesters would have known was what that FAQ said, and that was only if they were privy to what was in that FAQ. So that's something that's kind of more reliant on the Captain's Council than it is on like whether or not someone can play with their toys at an event that they want to go to. And he's back just in time. Perfect time.
Yeah. So with the sort of like Captain's Council format, you're not like beholden to any singular body. Like the captains are sort of collectively deciding the format, essentially.
Yep, it is a straight up vote on everything.
Okay. And so you got 24 teams this year. Theoretically, you've got 24 team captains building a pack together.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue the fact that the UK has 4 teams is them having a little bit more sway based on their meta, but that's about it.
Okay. I mean, that's fair. Okay, that makes them the home team. They've got the home team advantage. It is called the European something or other. But that just
they're not even in Europe anymore.
Oh, that's right. There's the hot take of the evening, because Brexit.
No, they are separate countries. They have different metas. Blah 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 blah. It would just be nice if we could have like 2 teams. Is really all it's about.
So you want like 2 USA teams? Like, you think we're big enough?
Yeah. I mean, considering like all of the UK is as big as Michigan, I believe. It would be nice. But I mean, like, so going into this year, we've already been using like TTS and stuff like that more. So we're already able to come together quite a bit more than we have in the past, just using our tools and kind of making up for that separation.
Well, so I've got this is a lesser known fact about the magical Mr. Mephisto here. I was actually the jungling alt for what is now Curse Academy, and I think they became Team Liquid or whatever for League of Legends. So my whole thing was to have a pipe dream that one day I might make the actual team, but really it just meant I jobbed to them in scrims and stuff when we didn't want to tip off our tech going into like the real tournaments for League of Legends. With TTS, your ability to scrim is like you've got it now. You can actually have like scrimmages against your own team, like teammates and practice that stuff. Do you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Literally constantly. There's two people playing right now. And Discord is awesome for that because we can watch games, we can do all sorts of different stuff as well. So that's been fantastic. TTS has been fantastic. Kind of what you mentioned. I mean, we have that group of 10 people that are relatively trusted too, right? So like we can kind of keep some things hidden by not playing them at events and just kind of play test games against people that we know.
Yeah, keep the low key tech. Keep that
Yep.
tech on. Yeah. Do you ever scrim cross the pond? Do you ever try to like set up TTS scrims against rival teams, or maybe you've got some super espionage scouts that are in the UK playing? Do you ever do anything like that?
No, that's way too much effort for this, especially anything else. We had already talked about having, so that's actually something that the 40K ETC team does, or now WTC team, is they actually usually go out a week early and go to Sweden, and they just practice, they just do reps with the Swedish team, because then it's not people who have discussed and known the ins and outs of every army, so you're not getting a tapered view of like what you might see. You're getting someone who has fresh
perspective. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's someone that, like, they're all friends of the team. We spent a lot of time with the 40K Team US team, so I know a bunch of the Swedish guys now. Like, that's just kind of how it worked.
Yeah.
So it was really cool.
So what ended up happening is around the time I was playing, TSM was like kind of the fan favorite. I don't know that much has changed. I haven't followed League of Legends in a while, but when I was an alternate on Curse, with Yin Dragoon and some other folks, we would team up with some of the other underdog teams to scrim each other to try to like get better at beating the best team. You gotta set that up, man. You gotta do, like, Australia. They're the Galapagos meta. If you're ever gonna get a different perspective on the game of Age of Sigmar, you gotta talk to some of them.
I mean, that is one of the coolest things about ETC, is the fact that like you can look at CanCon, for example, and be like, I don't know how the hell that would win in our meta whatsoever. I think a Corn Dragon got like second at CanCon 2 years ago. Like, that would never happen in the US. But it's just how the meta flushes out.
I mean,
you can look, they play on average more destruction than any other real big meta anywhere, things like that. So I mean,
I have a theory on this if you'd allow.
Yeah, go for it.
Or a hypothesis. We have to test it before it becomes a theory. My hypothesis is simply that with their distribution being weird and kind of throttled in some respects, they're forced to play with what they have a lot more than go out and get the new hotness, and it forces innovation on like that sort of in that pool of stuff. So like, whilst they're looking at their local metas. Their local metas are more spread out than even ours. We have a big landmass too, but theirs are yet also spread out. But then it means that because they have that sort of the distribution side of things that kind of mess with stuff, plus their own proclivities and their own natural leanings, they're forced to innovate with what they have a little bit more, and so you end up with some like just some really cool stuff in Australia. And it's one of those metas that I love to look at because I love puzzles, and I look at it and I go, huh. And I just but yeah, so that's
but that's one of the great things about ETC, right, is it's bringing all those different metas together. So not only are you playing against theoretically the best players of any of those countries, or at least the best team that they could come up with in whatever their way was, but you're also playing against what either they think is good against your meta or what their meta is. So like you're playing that weird kind of gray area between everything, where it's nothing like your meta at home.
I know this is I'm a American podcaster here, but I do think that like we tend to think of the UK meta as the default meta a little bit. Just the global Age of Sigmar community. a lot of our content creators, you got Vince Venturella is like one of our probably our biggest American one. Maybe you got like Doug, 2+ stuff, but he doesn't do competitive stuff, and you got like we've got a bunch of like American YouTubers, but in terms of like actual competitive coverage, we don't have a ton here. We got a bunch of podcasts. It really is the United States of podcasting too. Like we just have a bunch of separate, but you have guys like Ian and Richie with Just Play. You have Rob, and it is a small area, but there's so much Warhammer going on because they're so close to the source. It starts to feel like that's sort of the default setting. Of course, in Australia, you got Doom and Darkness, you got the Measured Wargaming blokes, you got AOS Coach. So you've got like you've got Dan AOS Shorts, who's got a really good handle on not just New Zealand and Australia, but also kind of a global approach. Like we all kind of have our like regional eyes out on this stuff, but it really feels like a lot of the sort of focused competitive commentary comes from Europe, and it starts to feel like they're the default setting.
Like you said, it's a lot of it is the biggest names in that space, right? Because you have Dan AOS Shorts down in I believe he's in New Zealand.
He's New Zealand.
Yeah. So you have him down there, but he covers the entire world. So he's the source, and so his font of knowledge is going to come from that area, but he covers the entire world, which is fantastic. So my go-to when I'm looking for event results is often a New Zealand website, or a guy that's writing a website out of New Zealand, or you see Rob all over the place with Honest Wargamer.
Rob's got good coverage. His reach is undeniable. He works. He's very hardworking. What he does.
I think at a certain point, it just takes someone who's that dedicated in the U.S. to actually pick up those reins if they actually want to. Mm-hmm. But I feel like we get a lot of our coverage from just those two guys, and like Rob has come over for multiple U.S. events.
Yeah,
so he's come to hang out with us over here as well. So like that, it's one of those things where I don't necessarily know that we need one. As far as the UK meta, I think it's kind of funny because it's been a running joke for a long time. Not necessarily. I've never heard it in the AOS space, but the 40K guys, the UK has said for years and years that the US meta was 6 months behind, which has always been really funny because when prominent US players go over to the UK, they just destroy in that area. So the US joke is that the UK is actually 6 months behind. The meta is just circular, so they haven't quite come around back to where we are yet. So I don't know how much of it is a similar idea in that space, but I feel like our US meta and the UK meta is a lot closer than like the US meta and the Australia meta or anything like that. And I think it's a lot of the communication between the guys. I've talked to Les Martin multiple times about, especially when like Cities of Sigmar came out, we were talking a bunch. Same with Tom Maudsley. So like there is that communication structure. Also, the U.S. playtesters and the UK playtesters are really close. Like, they talk a lot across the pond that way, too. So that kind of bridges those communities a little bit as well, since not all of our playtesters are in the Midwest, but a considerable portion.
Sorry. Our bad.
It's not your fault.
No, I'll take the blame for this one, GW. I'm your fall guy. It's me, nobody on the internet with a podcast that gets 90 views. But like 80 of them are Games Workshop staff. Is really
of course. Yeah.
10 of them. I think that kind of takes out one of the questions I was going to ask you. You already answered that pretty thoroughly, and you also kind of talked about like team comp and having a good rapport built there. So that's all really cool. The thing we were kind of talking about, I don't know if it was the cold opener before we went live, was actually kind of a lack of social media presence. And there's clearly communication going on between, obviously, like, the competition a little bit. Obviously, the playtesters have their own like groups that they do their NDA stuff like amongst each other. So social media, in terms of like we talked about professional sports before. I mean, come on, like sports tries to be very, very visible in terms of like the U.S. model, certainly for like NBA, all of our big three, right? They try to be super visible, super social. Our ETC team isn't like hyper visible. You've got an account. Bill's got an account, and I think that's both Jake and Sean have accounts.
Yep.
And then like
Jeremy has one too. Like it's 2019. We were relatively closed off, and that was a lot of the pushback that we got. Right, was that like Sam Gould was unknown. Sam Gould doesn't even have a Facebook account. He doesn't have a Twitter. He doesn't have any of that, and so nobody knows who he was. And in all honesty, he didn't play in that many ITC events either. No, so like he didn't have rankings on there.
From our outside perspective, some 40K guy, right? Like that's what like, that's what we're cool. Like Age of Sigmar is becoming 40K, which I don't know you, dear viewer, if you've picked up on this because we've talked a bunch about 40K, but Age of Sigmar purists are kind of, they don't want to become like 40K. We're afraid.
Absolutely. So it's really going off of that. It's really funny when people like Alan Pajama Pants, who is notorious as much in the 40K community as he is well known, comes over and mostly like, so he was on that team that year, right? Because Bill knew him pretty well. He had been to multiple 40K ETC events. So he knew that entire process, the pairing process. So he was our kind of knowledge base on that. And then he's also one of the best movement players that I've ever seen. Being able to pick up just like whatever he wants, as long as he knows what his opponent does, which I did that a lot of the time when I was coaching.
A little bit of the chess thing, a little bit of the moves, counter moves, and knowing where. Yeah, this is. It's hard to teach this.
This is what your opponent's list does. Here are some ideas for how to counter it, and then just let him go. And he's that kind of player where he will just like he just wins. That's what it is. So like that Bone Splitters list with Byron that we were talking about earlier, we kind of talked about it beforehand, and we ran through a quick is this going to work type of deal. And so I showed him what the list does, how it functions, and then he kind of just came out with a plan from there and went on and tabled Byron. So he's that player. And so, yeah, and there was that. So there was that pushback for Alan, was that he was a 40K player. And then if you look at Alan, he went to Michigan GT. He only lost to Bill. He went to SoCal Open. I lost to him there. He ended up winning the event. I lost to him in the finals. So, he went 1-2 at his first two big events. And then
This was the priority role. You were a priority role. It could have went either way. That was
no. This was a different game. This was this was 2 years ago. This was before the 2019 ETC. Right? So that was Alan's go. Alan literally played in 3 Age of Sigmar events. He was just a very good player. Mm-hmm. And then that LVO, he went top 8 with, I want to say it was 60 Grimghast Reapers, Arcan, and toys, something like that.
Kind of a relatively cookie cutter LON.
Yeah, here's your rules. They're relatively average. You have summonable units. Just play your army how it needs to be done and win objectives, and that's what he did at LVO. And that kind of shows, that if you know how to play to the objectives, you can really pick up anything and just kind of go.
There's also a little bit of a sort of exponential factor when you play enough armies. You pick up the next army quicker and quicker. So yeah,
absolutely. But I mean, that's what I mean is the 40K experience was transferable. It wasn't like it was, oh no, he's coming in as an AOS virgin. He's never going to be able to win a game. He literally went second, first, and then top 8 at LVO.
I try not to admit it, but I came over from my Warhammer Fantasy Battle play was against the same 4 people over and over and over again. I got my I've heard this said to me a couple times, and it just pisses me off every time I hear it. Is you've picked up this game real quick. Blood Bowl. In Blood Bowl, we were sitting in there and Frank, who I love you to death, buddy, but he's like, man, I'm so surprised at how quick you're picking up this game. And I'm like, I have played war games my whole life.
Look at what Mike didn't play a game of Blood Bowl until that, or he played one before last season. ended up winning it.
Yeah, he won
it
all.
Yeah, there's statistics. There's blocking out areas of the field. There's those are transferable skills.
Understanding zoning.
Yeah,
with your
coverage,
pieces and stuff like that. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
and then it's just learning the fine points throughout there. And he lost one game the entire season. And it was to Kyle, I think.
Yeah, he lost to Kyle. He did lose to me this season. I kicked the shit out of him.
I not last season, but yeah. Yeah, I watched that game. He had several injuries and one death.
Boom.
But yeah, I mean, so Sam Gould, no visibility, but he's been buddies with Bill since Bill was in Boston, and Bill just knew him as a really, he is an exacting player, and so he's a player that will move exactly the right way at exactly the right time, force you to make a mistake, and then take advantage of the mistake, and that's he literally won Adepticon, 4 months after we announced the team, with Old Seraphon that everyone said was really bad, and it was literally just off a skink movement, because he was able to exploit people screwing up, and that's all it was. So there is something to be said about lack of visibility.
I think it's an important point, which is why I bring it up, because now I look at this ETC roster going in, and I recognize pretty much every name on the list. Minus, like, I think one gentleman, I'm like, not quite. I know Jeremy. I know, obviously, Sean and Jake. I know you. I know Bill. I feel like who am I forgetting?
That's probably who. Did you say Jeremy?
Yeah.
Okay, that's probably who you know. And then our coach this year is Mike Vaginas.
That's the Mike you've referenced. Yeah.
Yep. So that's who I've known for 3 or 4 years now. Who really got me into the competitive scene. If you give him credit for anything, it was that.
Yeah.
And then the last one is Anthony Lawrence, who is
this is the one I don't recognize. The Anthony's.
Yeah, so he's up in the Boston area. Same thing. Like, I feel like social media is one of those things that unless you are trying to promote like a podcast like Jeremy is, or like, I don't know. I think people get into their veins of communication and then just kind of stay there rather than expanding out. Like we talked about before the show, I still don't really do anything on Twitter. Follow me if you want to know ETC news. That's really about it.
I just want to talk shit to you about Blood Bowl.
That's fine too. I retweet Bill and the UK team and anything else ETC related. That's really about all I do, just because like I have Discord to talk to people. I have Facebook Messenger. I have all sorts of other things that I'm already using. We were using Slack a ton just because people were already using it for work, and it was actually an application that they could access on work computers.
So, I don't want to bury the lead too much on this. I'm not criticizing like the lack of visibility of like previous players. I'm actually more curious about the role of like social media in terms of how we consume our game now. And ETC, it feels like it should be one of our biggest events that's the most talked about. But then on the flip side, I feel like we kind of don't.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true. Because one of the things we've been relying on, especially in the U.S., is GW coverage, right? That's one of the downsides to not having a Rob, not having a Dan, not having someone like that, is our LVO coverage. Our LVO coverage is either ITC or Games Workshop. Our Adepticon coverage is Games Workshop. Our Nova coverage is Games Workshop. Hold on.
No, you're fine. Sajil got all the work done.
So that's kind of we would need someone that could go to ETC, since like I said before, Games Workshop wasn't really supporting the event. Now they might in the future, who knows? Like maybe they'll send a camera crew now, but like there was no ad event coverage as much as anything else. So like I feel like that's why no one really got like a cult following behind it. No one was really watching games while we were playing them. There was just like Dan from AOS said, "Hey, here's everybody's lists," and then at the end it was, "Hey, here's the results," and that was really about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just again, it feels like it just feels like there's not nearly enough social media. Like I remember Six Nations feeling like it was way more covered than ETC, in that same year span around when AOS AOS 2.0 came out, it went 6 nat, and then next it was sort of in the calendar. Next up was,
yeah.
And I'm just like, go ahead.
And I remember that Six Nations that year was the first time I had even really heard about Six Nations. And a lot of the coverage was, hey, we're going to bring all the broken stuff that Games Workshop refused to fix.
Yeah.
And that's why, I feel like that's why I got a lot of coverage, was because a lot of people were unhappy about some of the things in that General's Handbook or the 2.0 or whatever. I don't even remember. Yeah, I don't even remember. Whatever. Yeah. I think it was General's Handbook. And no, it was 2.0. That's what it was.
2.0. 2.0 came out, and there was...
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's when, like,
stacking command abilities,
stacking command abilities, all that shit. It was like, all right, if Games Workshop refuses to do this, we're just going to abuse the hell out of it.
The whole community agreed. They're like, we think all this stuff is broken. And then they're like, we think all this stuff is broken. No one changed any of it. And they're like, all right, we're taking it all to the next major tournament. And then, and the whole, it was like the joke. And I remember there was that moment on the internet where, people... like me and Haywo was kind of my direct circle of puzzle brains, where we're just like there's all this stuff is going to be busted, and we got the joke. But I remember serious debates on the internet of look at all these people taking the most broken, disgusting stuff. This isn't my Age of Sigmar. And I'm like, that's what they're doing, right?
They're trying to fix it. That's what they're doing right now. So as much as people give the UK Team England shit for having a bunch of playtesters, they were a driving force behind that, because they were a bunch of the people that were...
They said it was... Yeah.
Beforehand, they're like, this is what needs to be fixed. Okay, it didn't get fixed. All right, guys, hey, we tried to get this fixed. This is what we're going to bring to Six Nations. And they, revealed their lists way beforehand, just to be like, hey, this is what we're bringing. They refused to fix any of it. And so that's kind of the...
And then everyone just one-upped each other, and that was... It was, the most, power to the people, rah, fight the power moment in Age of Sigmar I've ever seen. It was awesome, actually.
I remember you had one matchup that was literally two Nagashes trying to hand across each other through their own spell portal. And that's what that event was. It was a giant cluster. And it was because, hey, all right, if you're not going to fix things, this is how we get you to fix things.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that's what that kind of happened with Tzeentch too, right? You had a lot of big name people just lean into Tzeentch, where they're like, all right, if you're not going to fix Flamers, we're just going to lean into them. And then Games Workshop's like, fine, all right, we're going to raise their cost by 20 points.
And cut your teleports in half.
Yeah, and cut your teleports in half. It's like, all right, if you're not going to fix this, I'm going to abuse it in your face, but until you fix it.
Yeah, that's part of. That feels like the Slaanesh kind of felt a little bit like that too, where the depravity thing, they're like, really? Okay then.
I love how that lasted 8 months, and then also before it got fixed, got even worse with the Celeste Coast. That was the best part. And also from people I've talked to and hearing how bad it was in playtesting. Just some of the things that were bad in playtesting that did get fixed because it was worse than what actually got released. Those are the fun conversations. What didn't get through to live releases is sometimes the most jaw-dropping. Wait, they thought that was going to be okay, and that's kind of the fun conversation.
Well, I think we've had. I don't know who framed the argument that playtesters are the problem. That began. I'm like, playtesters are QC. They're on the back end. They're not the ones designing it, and they're not making the final calls. This is always.
They also don't see the final cut either. That's the other thing that doesn't have a lot of visibility. Is if I was a playtester, I would not put it out publicly, because you will just get burned constantly. But they don't see the final cut. Things change from what they see in playtesting to what gets published all the time.
Is that how TK got killed, Tomb King, Tristan? 40% of the players at the UK Masters took TK because they're like, this needs to be changed. And then...
no, Tomb Kings got taken away because they had giant hands that looked like monkey hands, and they just needed to go away.
Oh, no. I'm ready for 60 Liberators in GW's face. Oh, man. That army... The battalion just needs to just get jettisoned from the game. It's not meant to be played at 2K, but here we are. Yeah, that was some shade. The hands, that was Yeah, that take was so spicy. I just had to like move on to the next thing. I'm sorry, Tristan. It's a copyright thing. They can't.
I mean, half the Skaven things are the same way. They have giant hands. So
yeah, that's why Eshin sucks. They just
yeah. Eshin, they nerf half the Skaven book and then don't give the better rules to things that just suck in the Skaven book. That's basically how Skaven live.
Yeah, Petrifex Elite ruined any meaningful discussion we'll ever have about Ossiarch Bone Reapers. Like, Ivory Host just sitting over there like, yo, we suck. And actually, most of our sub-factions suck. I know everyone is holding out for Null Myriad to be good if we just get 2 more broken spellcasting armies, but think about the criteria you've set up for the game and its health. If we have 2 more busted spellcasting armies, it's worth playing Null Myriad. So just like rewind it. So we got like 4 spellcasting armies right now that are kind of like pushing the boundaries of what this game should do. And you're like, you want 2 more of those. So that 6 armies are that gross. And that's an excuse to justify one of your sub... Come on now. Null Myriad. I'm sorry, Null Myriad. You ain't good. I would rather you do some command ability, ignore spell effects, and then their core ability is they have a better shrug. Done. Fixed.
What if we just compromise and just make Sylvaneth casting great again?
Yeah, 100%. I'm for that. No, my friend Sam, I want him to be happy. He's one of my favorite people in the entire universe. And I've been to other dimensions in this universe. That's why I'm called the Magical Mr. Mephisto. And I want him to be happy again with his Sylvaneth army. Sajil here in chat, like, there's no reason Sylvaneth, which is one of the most new player grabbing armies in the entire game, it is one of the hobby darling armies of our entire game. You gotta at least be in that buoying in the fat middle type army. You gotta be there. I don't want them to be a 4-0 type army. But you gotta be like, I show up and I play it even remotely well, 3-2. Boom. I catch a little bit of heat. You know, like my dice run hot, 4-1. I get all the luck in the world. I get good pairings. Like, maybe you can run it back 5-0. But, like, you got to at least buoy in 3-2. And they're not there.
No, they have to take some risks and put in some effort to do well.
And
which is mind-blowing to me because, like, these are some of the things that I don't understand, is that the community acknowledged Sylvaneth is worse than probably it actually is. It just has that stigma of, like, being garbage. And, I mean, Kurnoth Hunters just on paper are a statistically good unit. It's just that's the only unit in that book that's good. And Durthu. And you don't have any of the pieces and the functionality that you need other than teleporting to make a well-rounded book. But, like, all they did in the General's Handbook is drop points on Kurnoth Hunters. Like, you made the thing that people were already taking just cost less, but not cost enough less to actually matter.
And to get you can't get a full extra unit of them.
No, not at all. Like at most, I think my list dropped 40 points. So I think I can take an extra endless spell if I want to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, they're not absolutely not as bad as people think, but they are the squeaky wheel right now. And Games Workshop always listens to the squeaky wheel.
Yeah.
Say what you will about, like, Petrifex Elite, but Evocators were not a problem in the game of Age of Sigmar with Gavriel Sherhart. I never lost to that crap. I don't know any single. Yeah, command point stacking is a problem of the game, not of specifically Gavriel. Anytime that something gets to command point stack, it pushes the boundaries of what should be allowed in the game of Age of Sigmar. Usually they throttle it through other mechanisms, but we were just talking about the Six Nations tournament. They had to go through, and that was when we had the pink errata go through and tell the vast majority of units that they can't stack their command abilities. The exceptions were left in. I'm like, what if you just flip the script, and be like, nobody gets to stack command points unless we say otherwise. Save yourself a lot of pink text. But that's not what they did. I'm still a little bit salty about that. The point is like, it's weird because it feels like they go backwards into, like, fixing some of these broken mechanisms, and they try to, like, fix everything around it sometimes. And with Sylvaneth, it's like I've watched you fix the squeaky wheel 1,000 times when it's not the broken wheel. And so even if Sylvaneth aren't as bad as people think, they're one of the most maligned armies right now, so they clearly need attention. Say what you...
absolutely. Like, Beasts of Chaos are the quiet version of that, basically.
Because the player base is smaller.
Yeah, the player base is smaller. They're not really making a ton of noise, so you expect them not to get touched. The fact that Sylvaneth literally had Kurnoth Hunters drop 10 points, and that was the only change in the entire General's Handbook, was mind-blowing.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree. I've watched you make worse changes. I've watched you make bigger changes for worse reasons because people were loud.
They literally dropped KO 10 to 15% across the board.
Why?
Fire
Slayers all over again. Fire Slayers all over again. I remember when they changed Fire Slayers. I'm on record in several of my own podcasts going, this is a mistake. They're already low-key one of the most obnoxious armies. People just aren't building them right. And their points changes forced you to build them right. And that was the great rub. And then they gave you extra points on top of it.
Well, the funny part about that was it was more the change in cap from 30 to 20. Allowed you to, like you could have brought 2 20-man squads already before that happened, but, like, it was only 40 points to get, like, 10 more or whatever. Like, it was nothing to get to their max unit bonus. And so you had to, like, it would just eat at my soul efficiency-wise to, like,
but it was
lose.
wrong.
I'm only getting 10 more, but, like, it's 2 units. Like, I understand that. But, like, I could get, like, 10 less and have it be way cheaper.
I know.
And that's what it was. They cap it at 20. They fix their cost. And then people are like, oh, this is way better now because I'm bringing 2 squads of 20, and now they can be in 2 places.
I should have always been bringing 2 squads of 20. like, yes, you should. And one of them fucking teleports. Come on. Like,
yeah.
Oh my god, that was one of those.
That was really fun. That was really funny. And then they do the opposite. Like, it seems like they just don't think about externalities sometimes, because then they do the opposite with Scryer Acolytes, because you wanted that bonus because that was what was giving you your +1 to wound. And they took that away by capping them lower, so literally one dies and you lose all your unit bonuses. Mm-hmm. Like, all right, cool. Mm-hmm. Now you're useless when one Scryer Acolyte dies.
Yeah.
Or anybody gets within an inch of them.
I mean, that was nipping it in the bud because we were about to see the Acolyte builds come out, and it was a problem.
I'd be surprised just because I don't believe that many people would want to buy like 60 metal models and paint them and play with them and transport them.
Baby, you just cast it.
Oh yeah, I have 5 that are very clearly
not metal.
Resin and not metal.
Yeah,
they look really good.
Yeah, you can, but it's almost like when you pick it up, there's like a feel to it that lets you know.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't put it in a sock and hit somebody with it. That's the difference in feel.
That's the difference. Yeah. All right. Man, I feel like we've covered a great stuff. We got some good tangents here at the end, which is what makes a great rantcast for me, is just having a wonderful conversation, staying mostly on topic, but not allowing it to constrain us from going off script a little bit. I have enjoyed this show very much. Time for Dad to go to bed.
All right.
Good night, Tomb King, Tristan. That's why you kit bash them using clan rats. Yeah, exactly. There's so much. Yeah.
What I was actually doing was plague monks with the heads from the plague catapults, because I never used the gas mask heads. So you could do that. That's what I did.
There you go. So any last soapbox moments? Any thoughts you need to get off your chest, my friend?
No, I think I pissed off enough people in the chat, but with the Tomb King comment, I think I did my job.
I mean, you pissed off Tomb King Tristan, but he counts for 300% of chat. So
he also forgot that we played Blood Bowl together, so I think he deserved it.
I think he was trolling you. He just yellow carded.
Oh, okay.
You're getting yellow carded right now. Tristan, I love you, man. Also one of my favorite people in the world. So Good night, Tomb Dad. And yeah, so we've pissed off Tristan adequately. We've talked about playtesters, which is something I tend not to do on my show because I feel like that market's cornered by other podcasts. I don't need to do that. And we talked ETC, competitive play, and a little bit of hobby too. So not so much narrative tonight. We gotta come back around to that sometime. Do the narrative podcast with Greg from Colorado.
I mean, that just consists of Marathi is the best, and it's a good thing that she's got now.
Can we talk about how Nagash should go down 180 points and or have a War Scroll change? I actually am cool with him being 900 points, but then he needs to be worth 900 points again. I guess what I'm saying is he needs to have the Petrifex Elite bonuses just on his War Scroll.
Well, so I think the biggest issue with him is you got 8th edition syndrome. Because like we were talking about earlier with 8th edition, like they weren't expecting soup and then everybody brought soup. Well, now Nagash has play in a bunch of different armies, Grand Alliance Death, whatever. We'll put that as in parentheses. And then you've got Legions of Nagash and then OBR. So now you have to be able to balance him between two different books.
And he's not.
Both point-wise and rule-wise. And right now he's just bad.
He's just bad in both books, though, is the problem.
Yeah.
Before, I took it, when they upped his cost to 880, I'm like, why are you upping him in Legions of Nagash? And then OBR came out a little bit later. I'm like, oh, this was future-proofing. Yeah, it makes sense, because he's YOLO.
And it made sense when he was a 2-up rerolling 1 save for 1 RDP in the OBR book.
Yep.
And also still had the entire spell lore from the realm that you were playing in. And all of that. That point cost made sense. Then they took away realm spells. Then they took away Petrifex Elite. Then, so he obviously had a point cost. There is absolutely no reason that he has 80 points more than Archaon. Zero reason. Archaon has more durability. He has more buff potential between different keywords. He has about the same movement, basically the same defense, except for you can push his defense higher now because you can get +1s to save, whereas Nagash can't. And then, honestly, he has better access to spells because the Tzeentch head can eat spells if you kill wizards with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a kicker. That's a can of worms, though, is making things cost different points in different books. I don't know if that's a thing I don't know if that's a can of worms Games Workshop is ready to open. I thought they were setting themselves up for it when I saw Beasts of Chaos have different War Scrolls. So you had Beasts. You had Gores of Slaanesh or whatever when they changed it to where their War Scrolls changed to be what keyword they were on. I'm like, oh, this means they're going to cost more points in the different stuff. Never happened. I don't think that's a mechanism or a lever they're ready to pull.
Yeah, so I thought they were. I saw the problem originally the second we had Reapers and Legions of Nagash. I got the change. It was in the starter set. They wanted you to buy the fun new toys and still be able to play with your old toys. Mm-hmm. Made sense. They were way more abusable in Legions of Nagash than they were in Nighthaunt, though. I thought that we had gotten the change when Beasts of Chaos came out and Enlightened had different rules in both books, and Zangors had different rules in both books. Obviously, one had a lot more magic presence in the book, so this rule makes more sense for them. Like the plus attack, they cover that bonus better. And then only getting the +1 to attack for every 9 models in the Beast of Chaos book that already can pump out attacks from other units that are in the book. So I thought they were doing it with that, and then they ended up just saying, oh no, this is a universal change.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. They could keep things separate and have things cost different amounts or have different rules in different books. They just choose not to.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I thought we were about to get that, and then we just never did. So I don't know. At least
honestly, I don't know that I'd have to remember 2 different War Scrolls for the same model or something like Nagash. Enlightened, it's a little different because you might not play him in both. Nagash, I think, is that big centerpiece model. It doesn't really make sense for.
But that's where the Allegiance abilities. Nagash doesn't know all of the spells in Osiric Bone Reach.
Like that, he should be able to pick a lore and know all the spells in that lore.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the Legion of Nagash book. Yeah, it should just say that in the lore spells. It says if you have why don't they do that? That should just, as soon as they did it for Ossiarch Bone Reapers, they should have just errated the Legions of Nagash book. Now I feel like the wheels turned. We're kind of far past nitpicking on this. We're just waiting for either a new LON book to exist, whatever the vampire thing is, or for LON to just kind of disappear.
Yep. Yeah, we'll see. I don't think LON will ever disappear because
Cities of Sigmar type.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be more like that. Which, I mean, it kind of already is, because, I mean, it's 6 different allegiances in that book.
It's 6 armies. Like, 6 quote-unquote
6
armies.
Yeah.
We didn't figure the sub-faction, like, mechanism, we hadn't figured that out yet. So, like, cities, they need to retool it to be more like cities, where it's 6 different, sub-factions rather than 6 different armies.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't play them as much and don't see them as much, obviously, but they already kind of work that way, don't they? Other than the leadership mechanic, because like you obviously can't have Nagash in them, which makes it different than OBR because he can be in all of them, even though he really shouldn't be. It's
unnecessarily restrictive, is my problem with it.
Yeah, but I don't think that you should be able to have, for example, Arcan lead a Legions of Blood army, because why would they be following Arcan instead of Neferata? That kind of thing is my issue.
But they put that at the forefront and be like, you can't have this. You could just that could just
they already
easily,
do it though.
Yeah, that could just as easily be a sub-faction denotion too.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Is it's already kind of that's kind of what it is. Other than the fact that they get all different relics, all different,
which feels
traits.
Way too granular for me. Like it's just. I mean, it's a ton of options, but. I mean,
Cities of Sigmar is the same way, though.
But they streamlined it, and they don't really lock anything out. You don't lock anything away. You unlock stuff if you follow the rules. And that's, I think, the better way to build. You want to enable people to make the right decisions. You don't want to say you can't make that decision, is the difference.
But you don't really lock anything other than general and having Nagash in the army in that. Like, Nagash is the one thing that I guess you could FAQ and change, but that's the only one that really is locked away in only the Grand Alliance Legion Nagash.
Yeah, I just feel for cleanliness. I just want it to be one army that we're tracking instead of 6.
Yeah, I mean, it could easily be streamlined for that specific reason and have those be sub-chapters and bring Legion of Grief into the fold.
That's my concession, is I just want it to be streamlined for, like...
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, there's no reason that ITC and Dan from AOS Shorts and Rob and all those people have those as separate factions. That's Legions Nagash. Those are sub-allegiances.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I guess it's just semantics at this point, and I concede entirely. This is the one exception to we call it by the book instead of by the army. It's the exception we make, and we go our separate ways. I mean,
the Skaven clans are a hell of a lot more restrictive than Legions and Gash are.
True.
Because battle lines all restricted, generals are all restricted. Like what can be in the army if you want to bring certain things as battle line. Not just like who can be your general, but what can be in the army at all is restrictive in Skaven. So that's one of the. But at the same time, I think it's one of the most well-rounded books there is, which is a fun catch-22.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's the flip side of Seraphon, where I think Seraphon's one of the best Bones books they've released. In terms of just this is what a book with multi sub factions and battalions locked behind stuff. This is what that should look like. And I'm like, but one side of it is so clearly better than the other that it's not even funny.
See, I think that's a funny one because I don't know. In the U.S., I see a lot more Coalesce now. In the UK, I see a lot more Starborn. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of one of those splits. At least it was. I haven't really been paying attention to the UK.
It's COVID.
But when TTS was first starting to be a thing, all the UK events, Starborn with Croak, bombs, and all that stuff, were all winning everything. And over in the US meta, it was all the Coalesce stuff that was winning everything. Because we had a lot of low attack, high rend, high damage stuff. Well, when you cut that damage by 1, it now doesn't do nearly as much against some things. So, I was running, when TTS was first being a thing, I was running Thunder Lizards with either Thunderquake or Shadow Strike was 2 different lists, and just running through people with it. So I would argue that Coalesce is the best, but the UK argues that Starborn's the best, which
That's
I think
funny.
is funny. In reality, the issue is that they made that book so efficient synergy-wise that it's glorious how efficient that book is, but it also means that you have like 5 threats while other armies have like 3 threats. And that's really what the issue is the threat density for those armies is just so off the charts that a lot of armies can't deal with it.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, no, that's more than fair. I just like it from, like I said, from a blueprint standpoint. I love the way they handled.
Oh, I loved it. Yeah, I love that book. And efficiency wise, like I said, it's perfect.
It's like giving you a box of Legos and saying and then just like you turn the Lego box on the side and it shows you all the ways you can build it, and you're like, like as a book, whereas like other things, like they hand me a box of Legos, but half of the Legos are Lincoln Logs, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I can't build anything with these Lincoln Logs. These don't belong in here whatsoever.
Yeah.
I can only play with these toys, I guess. That's exactly what it is. There is, other than Razor Dawn's being the redheaded stepchild in that book, that
they got punished. They were getting punished from a previous meta, but
that's one of those things where it's like, I want to know how bad it was in playtesting if you think Razor Dawns and Salamanders should be the same points. Like, what to make that slip through the cracks, what didn't make it through? Right? I just want to know for curiosity's sake.
Yeah, amazing. Man, what a great episode! This is the one. This is everyone's gonna watch this one. This was amazing. Greg, thank you so much for being on. We should have done this way sooner. I've enjoyed talking to you in Discord, just hanging out, shooting the shit. Talking about Blood Bowl, or the couple times we've ended up just in voice chat, just hanging out. It's been a real pleasure getting to know you. So thank you so much for being on tonight. I love you sharing your perspective on the competitive play and ETC, and being candid with your opinions. So I really enjoyed this episode.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, right on. And I know we were going to mention it earlier, but Mini Stomp, hey, thank you for helping with the jerseys. Yeah,
thanks for helping with the jerseys last year. It was awesome. Meph and I were talking about who to plug. I'm like, well, I don't really have a podcast. I don't care about anything else. It's like, oh yeah, Mini Stomp helped us out so much. So, most of you, I'm sure, already know through other means, but like one of the best places online to order anything Games Workshop if you want a little bit of a discount. Or find like random stuff. I saw on his website that he had a special edition Skaven book. Just stuff like that just gets lost in his backlog because he just keeps so much on hand, unlike most of the online people.
Oh, he sold out a Varangard recently, and I'm very cross about it. He's like, I've never seen $100 kits go that fast, and I'm like, I know, because you were selling them at the lowest legal price one possibly could for Black Friday, and I'm upset that I heard about it late. But he enabled me to collect my Slaanesh, a decision I should have made a couple years ago before I got worried that the community would hate me for being a toxic element if I played an army I was interested in. I'll make a thumbnail for this YouTube upload. Thank you so much, Sajil. I appreciate that. And Chris Seeby dropping 1,000 RDP to remind everyone that Chat Gang ain't nothing to mess with as we close out this evening. Chat Gang, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. You are the show within the show. You are the reason we do this thing. Greg, once more, thank you so much for being with me tonight. And remember, drink your milk, pay your taxes, and Petrofex did nothing wrong.